The sound of the alarm clock shattered Nara's peaceful sleep. Startled, she fumbled to silence it, only to lose her balance and tumble from the bed with a yelp. Ouch! Her cry filled the room as she blinked away sleep, her gaze landing on the alarm clock several meters away, now in pieces. Shock rippled through her. It was the last gift from her mother before she passed, and Nara couldn't believe it lay broken before her. Crawling across the floor, she gently gathered the shattered pieces. It was damaged, yes, but she knew it could be repaired. As she fumbled with the broken alarm clock, her eyes glanced to the shiny ring on her finger. Immediately a smile broke out from her lips. Andrew had proposed to her the night before. It still felt surreal to her. She couldn't shake the feeling of pure joy that flooded her heart. She would always remember how he had called her earlier that day, his voice trembling with excitement, asking her to meet him at their favorite restaurant. The sight of the table adorned with flowers, the anticipation as she walked in, and the overwhelming love in his eyes as he knelt down on one knee, all of it was etched into her memory like a cherished painting. "Will you marry me?" were the words Andrew said, which sent shivers down her spine. She would still remember how she shouted the word yes immediately he popped the question. Nara was pulled abruptly from her reverie by the piercing ring of her phone. With a hopeful smile, she hurriedly reached for it, her heart fluttering with anticipation that it might be Andrew calling. But as she glanced at the screen, her smile faded instantly. It was Yvonne calling. Her heart sank, a mix of disappointment and confusion clouding her thoughts. What does she want this time? Nara muttered. Has she gotten news of her engagement? She asked herself. That would be impossible. She said, shaking the thought off her head. She watched as the call ended. She was in no mood for any of her shenanigans. Almost immediately her phone rang again. This time, it showed Gwen. Nara immediately picked up the call. Good morning, she muttered under her breath. Yvonne said she has been calling you and you refused to pick her calls, the woman at the other end said, ignoring her greetings. She only called once and I missed it, she said, defending herself. There was silence at the other end of the call for a few seconds, before Nara broke the silence by muttering, I'm sorry. Need I remind you that your father's birthday is today? Gwen asked, ignoring her apology. I have not forgotten about it, Nara said. You know your father is a public figure now. Make sure you attend the party before the press starts to speculate that we aren't treating the illegitimate daughter of the Vespertine household well enough, Gwen said firmly. But... Also, Yvonne's fiancé, Briston, will be attending the party. I don't want you causing any scenes. Just show your face to the press as a member of the family and then stay out of sight for the rest of the party, she ordered, cutting Nara short. Okay, but also, make sure you don't dress too extravagantly. It's your father's birthday party and the day your sister is introducing her fiancé to the family. I don't want to see you in any of your flashy dresses because today is not about you, she said sternly. What do you expect me to wear to a party? Nara asked, confused. Have I made myself clear? Gwen barked. Nara kept quiet for a while and finally muttered, yes. Good. See you at 5, she said and ended the call. Nara wouldn't believe her ears. She was already used to Gwen and all her excesses, but telling her not to dress beautiful to a party got her surprised. She knew it was because of Yvonne. Gwen Vespertine would never let anyone outshine her daughter. She was not even planning on attending, so Gwen had nothing to worry about. Almost immediately her phone rang again. What does she want again? Nara said angrily with a frown, which died few seconds immediately she saw the caller ID. It was Andrew. Hi, babe. Good morning, Andrew said immediately she picked up the call. His voice sent cold shivers down her spine. It was deep, masculine, and undeniably sexy. Whenever she heard it, she couldn't help but smile, though she never admitted it to him. Instead, she always teased him, saying he sounded funny. Good morning, Nara said, giggling. Don't tell me I sound funny, he said, his voice mixed with chuckles. You know you always do, Nara replied, smiling, looking at the shiny ring on her finger. You know I can't believe we are engaged, Nara said, caressing the ring. Get used to it, babe, and also get ready to walk down the aisle with me in 2 months, he said. Nara's eyes widened. She was in love. "Yes, sir," she said jokingly. "We are attending your dad's birthday, right?" he asked. Nara kept quiet for a while. "Nara, are you there?" Yes, I'm here." "We are attending your dad's birthday, right?" he asked again. "I don't plan on attending," Nara said finally. "Nara, you can't be serious. This is my only chance of formally meeting your family." "We will meet them eventually, but not today," she said quietly. "Nara." "Okay, fine," Nara said finally. She knew there was no hope arguing with Andrew. He had been talking about her father's birthday party non-stop ever since she told him about it. She knew he wanted to make himself fully known to the family, but she was scared. Scared of the fact that Gwen and Yvonne would find a way to humiliate him, scared that her father would not accept Andrew. "Nara, I know how your family can be, but the earlier we let them know about our engagement, the better for us. We can't keep hiding our relationship from them, you know," he said. "You are right," she said finally. "My beautiful Nara," he said, trying to cheer her up. Nara smiled shyly. Andrew always had a way of making her smile. "I need to get going. I have some paperwork I need to go through," he said finally. "Oh, okay. I will pick you up by 4:30, he said finally, before hanging up the call. She remembered the day she met Andrew vividly. It was on her way back from a shoot, and the rain poured down relentlessly. Using her hands to shield herself, she suddenly felt a shelter above her. Looking up, she found him there, holding an umbrella over her head. In that moment, amidst the rain and the unexpected gesture of kindness, it felt like time had paused. As she glanced at the ring on her finger now, she couldn't help but marvel at how quickly time had flown by. She lay on her bed for a few more minutes before finally getting up. The broken alarm clock was still on the floor. She picked it up and placed it on her vanity. The room was cloaked in darkness as Nara moved towards the windows, her steps muffled by the soft carpet underfoot. The heavy curtains hung still, blocking out the early morning light. As she reached out, the fabric felt cool against her fingertips. With a gentle tug, she drew open the curtains, allowing the bright morning sunlight to flood into the room, causing her eyes to squint. Her stomach grumbled loudly. She realized she had eaten very little the night before due to the excitement of her engagement. She quickly rushed into the bathroom to wash up before heading into the kitchen to make breakfast. She was almost done making pancakes when she heard a knock on the door. Nara was surprised. She was not expecting anyone. "Nara," the voice behind the door shouted. "Elena!" Nara shouted from the kitchen and quickly rushed to open the door. There she stood with a beaming smile, her tall and slender figure highlighted by her dark wavy hair that flowed gracefully down her back. Her warm olive skin and striking almond-shaped eyes caught the eye, while her high cheekbones and defined jawline gave her a sophisticated look. Elena was beautiful, but Nara was more beautiful. Elena had been Nara's best friend since college. She traveled to Italy to scout models for her company and was not supposed to be back till the month ended. "Come and give me a hug, silly," Elena said, opening her arms to embrace Nara. "How? I mean, what are you doing here? I thought you were supposed to be in Italy," Nara said after hugging Elena. "Well, I decided to take a little break upon hearing my best friend just got engaged," Elena answered, following her inside. "You've made some changes to your apartment," Elena observed, looking around. "You noticed?" Nara asked, scratching her head. "Oh my God, is that your ring?" Elena exclaimed. She rushed to where Nara stood and held her fingers so tightly. "Oh my God, they are so beautiful!" she exclaimed. "You like?" Nara asked, twirling her hair. "I'm so happy for you," Nara Elena said, hugging her tightly. "Wait a minute, something smells nice in here. Are you making pancakes?" she asked her as she found her way to the dining table. "You hungry?" Nara asked as she set 2 plates on the dining table. "I'm famished." "That reminds me, Nara, your father's birthday is today, right?" "Yeah," she answered from the kitchen, then joined Elena at the table. Elena was munching on an apple she had taken from the fruit bowl. Nara placed the pancakes on the table and sat down to eat. "So, what are you getting him for his birthday?" Elena asked, her mouth filled with pancakes. Nara's eyes widened. She hadn't really thought about getting him a present. "I think I'll just pick something up from the mall on my way there," she said finally. "Nara, how long has it been since you saw your father?" Elena asked gently. The room grew silent for a moment. "Not that long since I moved out," Nara answered quietly. Elena looked at her friend with concern but said nothing, focusing on her food. Nara felt her friend's silence like a weight, interpreting it as unspoken criticism. "What now?" she asked defensively. "Nothing," Elena replied softly, continuing to eat. "Look, it's not like he needs me around. I can't be where I'm not wanted." "Are you saying all this because of your sister and her mother?" Elena probed gently. Nara kept quiet, nibbling on her breakfast. "Maybe," she admitted finally. Elena looked at her friend, her eyes conveying understanding and empathy. She remembered how devastated Nara had been when she was thrown out of the Vespertine mansion, spending the night crying on Elena's shoulder. She squeezed Nara's hand reassuringly, silently conveying everything will be all right. "Speaking of which, Gwen said I should make sure not to dress too fancy for the party," Nara added, trying to lighten the mood. Elena nearly choked on her pancakes as she burst out laughing. "So she's finally realized her daughter is the ugly duckling," she joked, laughing heartily. Nara smiled. "Well, she doesn't need to worry. I don't have anything nice to wear for the party. I'll just put on my old clothes." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "After all, I'm only needed to take pictures as part of the family and to prevent the press from spreading false rumors about the family." "You must be joking," Elena said, her face serious. She looked at Nara, who didn't even bother to meet her gaze. "This girl must be out of her mind," she said to herself. "It's high time you stop obeying Gwen and all her stupid orders," Elena declared passionately. "You are beautiful and you are going to flaunt it. Now go upstairs and get dressed. We're going to get you a new dress." Elena's sharp eyes fell upon a striking black halter strap dress, its shiny stones shimmering under the store's lighting. "Nara, try this dress on, it will suit you," Elena suggested, dragging Nara to where the dress was. Nara hesitated, her fingers gently grazing the fabric as she scrutinized the dress. "Isn't it too revealing?" she voiced uncertainly, feeling apprehensive about its snug fit and daring cut. Elena, however, dismissed her concerns with a knowing smile, immediately motioning for an attendant to retrieve the dress. "Nonsense," she remarked confidently. "This will look stunning on you. Quick, try it on." Reluctantly, Nara walked into the fitting room. Nara struggled with the tightness of the dress as she eventually emerged, pulling at the hem in discomfort. The dress hugged her curves tightly, accentuating her figure in a way that made her feel exposed. "You look dashing," Elena declared, striding over with unwavering enthusiasm despite Nara's uneasy expression. "It's beautiful," she added with a laugh, disregarding Nara's discomfort. Their laughter echoed in the fitting area, punctuated by Nara's admission, "Seriously, I can't wear this." Suddenly, one of the attendant who noticed Nara's discomfort approached her with a soft red dress in hand. "Ma'am, I think this would suit you better," she suggested, offering an alternative to the provocative black dress. Nara gratefully accepted the change, her smile returning as she retreated to the fitting room to try on the more modest red dress. Elena eyed the attendant and quickly sat on a sofa. She brought out her phone to reply her emails. She was so engrossed in her phone, she didn't notice when Nara walked out of the dressing room. "How do I look?" Nara asked, smiling brightly. Elena's eyes widened in disbelief as she gazed at Nara. She looked stunning. "Oh my God, Nara, this is beautiful," Elena exclaimed, jumping up from the sofa and crossing the room to where Nara stood, facing the mirror. "I know, right?" Nara replied, her voice filled with elation. Nara wore a stunning red dress that fit her perfectly. The fabric was smooth and shiny, like satin, and it shimmered in the light. The dress had a pretty neckline that showed off her collarbones, and the sleeves were made of delicate lace. It hugged her waist nicely. The bodice of the dress was decorated with embroidered flowers in red and gold, which stood out against the deep red color. Elena gently took Nara's arms in hers, "Now, this is the perfect dress for you," she said with conviction. Nara nodded, smiling in agreement. After paying for the dress, Nara selected a watch as a birthday gift for her father. They then headed to the salon for a hairdo, before finally returning home. Andrew's car was parked outside Nara's apartment precisely at 4:30. He stood by the car, dressed in a sleek black tuxedo, anticipation and nervous excitement evident on his face. Inside, Nara had finished preparing herself. Her long black hair styled neatly in a bun which framed her face elegantly. As she stepped out the door, Andrew couldn't take his eyes off her. She looked like a goddess, the dress fitting her like it was made for her. Nara approached him with a gentle smile, planting a light kiss on his cheek. "You look so handsome," she whispered softly. "Thank you," Andrew replied, his voice filled with admiration. "You are stunning." He opened the car door for her, and as she gracefully entered, he couldn't resist stealing glances at her as he made his way around to the driver's side. As they drove off, a sense of pride swelled within him. Nara was not just beautiful, she was his, and he couldn't have been more grateful. The Vespertine mansion bustled with guests and reporters, a fitting scene for Edward Vespertine's birthday celebration. Despite the passage of time, the mansion retained its timeless beauty and grandeur. Andrew found a parking space and carefully parked the car before stepping out to open the door for Nara. As she emerged, her heart began to race, a mix of excitement and apprehension tightening her chest. Her stomach churned nervously and her palms felt clammy. The prospect of going inside filled her with reluctance. Andrew approached her, sensing her unease, and gently took her hands in his. "Don't be nervous," he said soothingly, his voice a comforting anchor in her anxious thoughts. His words provided a moment of relief, and she took a deep, steadying breath. Gradually, the tension in her shoulders eased as she leaned slightly into his reassuring presence. "Okay," she finally replied with a small smile, summoning her resolve. She linked her arm through his, drawing strength from his supportive gesture, and together, they walked towards the entrance. As they entered the grand mansion, all eyes turned towards Nara, captivated by the vision in the stunning red dress. Her every step was deliberate and graceful, commanding attention with each movement. The red gown hugged her figure elegantly, the sweetheart neckline accentuated her neckline, while the lace sleeves added a touch of delicate charm. Nara's long black hair, styled in a neat bun, framed her face like a crown, enhancing her regal appearance. Her confident demeanor radiated with each step, drawing admiring glances from every corner of the room. As she walked further into the mansion, the air seemed to hum with whispers of admiration. Guests and onlookers couldn't help but stare in awe at her beauty and poise, making her the undeniable focal point of the evening. "Who is she?" someone inside the crowd asked. "That's the illegitimate daughter," someone replied. There were murmurs and whispered everywhere. "Edward has a daughter this beautiful?" someone asked again. Nara glanced discreetly and caught sight of Yvonne and Gwen, along with her father. Their gazes felt piercing, as if they could cut through steel with their intensity. Yvonne's sharp eyes narrowed with a hint of scrutiny, while Gwen's expression carried a mix of curiosity and guarded interest. It was clear they were assessing Nara with a keen and almost challenging scrutiny, their stares conveying a blend of intrigue and perhaps even a touch of skepticism. As Nara approached them, her heart raced with each step, a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. Andrew instinctively covered her hands with his, offering quiet reassurance as they faced her family. "Happy birthday, Dad," Nara greeted, her smile somewhat strained. Edward's gaze swept over her, registering surprise and something else she couldn't quite decipher. His eyes then shifted to Andrew, his expression turning guarded. "Who is this young man with you?" he asked, his tone cool. "This is Andrew, my fiancé," Nara replied calmly. though inside she felt the tension thickening around them. The revelation stunned everyone into silence. Yvonne's disdainful gaze spoke volumes, while Edward seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Gwen, breaking the silence, spoke with authority. "Finish your greetings, Nara. Meet me upstairs on the patio afterward," she commanded, leading Yvonne away, who looked visibly displeased. Andrew observed the scene, realizing for the first time the tension Nara had described about her family. The cold reception confirmed her concerns. Edward, aware of the attention, composed himself. "We'll discuss this after the party," he said quietly, then excused himself. Andrew breathed a sigh of relief. "Wow," he murmured. "I told you," Nara whispered to him, her voice tinged with resignation. "I didn't know it was this bad," he replied calmly. Nara looked at him, noticing that his eyes, once filled with expectations, were now clouded with disappointment. She held his hands reassuringly, as if to convey that everything would eventually be all right. "I suppose the two women standing beside your father are your stepmother and sister, right?" he asked. "Yes, Gwen and Yvonne," she confirmed. "They're quite something," Andrew remarked, prompting Nara to chuckle softly. "Speaking of which, I need to meet Gwen upstairs. Can you give me a moment?" Nara requested. "Sure, don't stay out there for long," Andrew replied. Nara smiled warmly. "I won't be long," she assured him before heading upstairs. Andrew glanced around the bustling room filled with guests. He grabbed a drink from a passing waiter, hoping to occupy himself until Nara returned. As she ascended towards the patio upstairs, Nara heard the faint sounds of bickering between Yvonne and Gwen. Pausing at the corridor, she took 3 deep breaths before mustering the courage to enter. Upon stepping onto the patio, Nara was immediately met with 2 hot slaps across her cheeks from Gwen. The force nearly knocked her off balance, and as she struggled to regain her footing, Yvonne grabbed her arm tightly. "Must you show up every time to ruin things for me?" Yvonne barked angrily. Still reeling from the impact of the slaps, Nara couldn't fully comprehend Yvonne's words. "Let her go," Gwen intervened firmly. "But Mom," Yvonne protested. Gwen fixed Yvonne with a stern glare, and reluctantly, Yvonne released Nara's arm. "Madam Gwen, Briston Antonov has arrived," Selina, the head housekeeper, announced abruptly, bursting into the room. "Briston is here," Yvonne exclaimed excitedly, rushing downstairs to meet him. Selina glanced sympathetically at Nara. She felt pity for her. Selina had been the only one who took care of Nara after the death of her mother. "Leave us," Gwen ordered. Selina bowed her head and quietly shut the door behind her. Gwen turned her fury towards Nara, her eyes blazing with rage. "Didn't I warn you about this slutty dress of yours?" she shouted at Nara, whose face flushed red as she covered her cheeks with her palm. "And what's with this new stunt of yours showing up here with that man you call a fiancé, knowing full well that Briston Antonov was coming today to announce his engagement to your sister?" Gwen's voice dripped with disdain as she stared at Nara accusingly. Nara remained silent, lacking the strength to respond. "Answer me," Gwen demanded sharply. Nara met Gwen's gaze, her eyes betraying anger, though she felt powerless. "I'm sorry," she muttered finally. "Don't tell me you were trying to seduce Briston with this," Gwen accused, pulling at the neckline of Nara's dress. "I had no intention of doing that," Nara shouted, pushing Gwen's hands away. Her eyes then caught sight of the engagement ring on her finger, and she burst out laughing. "You call that thing on your finger an engagement ring? Well, I'm glad you finally found your place." "In the slums," Gwen spat. Nara was speechless, stunned by Gwen's cruelty. Before she could react, Gwen seized her by the neck. "Now listen here. The next time I give you an instruction, make sure you don't flaunt it, or you won't like the consequences," Gwen warned, tightening her grip. After several struggles, Gwen finally released her. "Go back downstairs with a smile on your face and wipe those tears away," she commanded before leaving. Nara clenched her fists in anger, glaring at Gwen's departing figure. She took 3 deep breaths and blinked back tears. "I have to be strong." I can't let her weaken me, Nara whispered to herself, mustering her resolve before heading downstairs. As she was coming down the stairs, she sees a commotion around the entrance. Who was that? A very handsome man that looked like he just walked out of a Greek god painting was walking in with about 8 security men. All eyes were on him. Nara wondered who he was to get this much attention. Well, apart from his looks and body, that is. She was still in her thoughts when his eyes began to scan around, and his eyes stopped on her and stayed. Nara looked behind her and then back at him, and their gazes locked again. He was looking at her? As soon as Edward Vespertine spotted the man, he hurried over and greeted him warmly. Gordon Antonov, I didn't expect you to grace my party with your presence. Gordon looked at him, his expression impassive as he tucked his hands into his trouser pockets. I do not intend to stay for the party, he said coldly. Edward was taken aback. To what do I owe this visit, then? He asked, perplexed. I have come to get my wife, Gordon replied, his gaze fixed on Nara. Your wife? Edward asked, his voice tinged with shock. The room erupted in gasps and whispers, the pianist's rendition of Beethoven coming to an abrupt halt. A profound silence swept over the hall, as if time itself had paused. When did Gordon Antonov get married? A reporter asked, bewilderment clear in his voice. Curiosity and intrigue rippled through the crowd. Who could possibly be the woman brave enough to marry someone as reclusive and aloof as Gordon Antonov? Gordon Antonov, the enigmatic first son of the Antonov family and Briston Antonov's elder brother, had been absent from the public eye for 5 years. Known for his stoic demeanor and minimal social interactions, Gordon was a man who spoke only when necessary. His focus on business was unwavering, leaving little room for personal life. So the revelation of his marriage stunned everyone present. With a deliberate calmness, Gordon withdrew his hands from his pockets and walked past Edward, ignoring his question. His gaze was fixed ahead as he ascended the stairs towards Nara. Nara stood rooted in place, her mind racing. Who is this man? And why is he heading straight for me? She wondered, her heart pounding with confusion and apprehension. Before she could fully grasp the situation, Gordon took her hand with a firm yet gentle grip, leading her down the stairs. Overwhelmed and dazed, Nara found herself following him almost instinctively. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their fascination growing as Gordon and Nara made their way out of the hall together. As Nara followed Gordon outside, her mind raced with questions. Why was she following this man she didn't even know? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but her feet kept moving. Once outside, Nara quickly withdrew her hand from Gordon's, feeling an odd mix of relief and confusion. He turned to face her, his demeanor calm and composed. Up close, Nara couldn't help but notice how strikingly handsome he was. His features were almost too perfect, and for a moment, she found herself lost in admiration. She shook herself out of it immediately. Who are you? She finally demanded, her voice tinged with frustration. Gordon regarded her with a steady gaze, clearly taken aback by her question. Did she really not know who he was? He opened the car door and gestured for her to get in. Get in. I'll explain on the way. Nara laughed, a sound laced with disbelief. Are you out of your mind? How do you expect me to get into the car of a complete stranger? Some nerves you have. Gordon's smile was disarming as he closed the car door behind him. Forgive me if I came off the wrong way, he said, his tone genuinely apologetic. Nara sighed deeply, trying to piece together how she ended up in this situation. What had possessed her to step outside with him in the first place? I don't want to seem rude, but I think you've mistaken me for someone else. I'm not married to anyone, at least not yet. If you'll excuse me, she said firmly, turning to leave. But as she tried to walk away, one of Gordon's men stepped in her path, blocking her way. Nara looked back at Gordon, who signaled for the man to let her pass, torn between going back to the party, where she would face a barrage of questions she couldn't answer, and heading home to seek solace. Nara made her decision. She needed to escape the confusion and chaos. With a heavy heart, she resolved to go home. She quickly walked out of the gate, quickly stopped a taxi, which zoomed off immediately she got it. Back at the mansion, bewilderment hung heavy in the air. Gwen approached Andrew, who stood frozen, his expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. "Tell me this is a joke," she demanded, her voice laced with anxiety. Andrews responded by walking past her, ignoring her question entirely. He headed toward the exit, his steps heavy with unspoken emotions. "That was your elder brother, right?" Yvonne whispered urgently to Briston, her eyes wide with confusion. "Yes, but—" Briston began, only to be cut off. "How the hell is he married to Nara?" Yvonne interrupted, her voice sharp with shock. Briston shook his head, equally baffled. "I'm as confused as you are," he admitted. He set his wineglass down. "Excuse me," he said, and headed towards the exit. The room buzzed with murmurs of surprise and speculation. Finally, Edward, who had been silent throughout the commotion, stepped forward. With an air of authority, he addressed the crowd. "Let's continue with the party. These are mere coincidences. Don't let the atmosphere deter you," he said, gesturing for the pianist to resume playing. Gwen, however, was not in the mood to party. She turned to Yvonne, whose mood was already dark, and said, "Follow me upstairs." Once they reached Yvonne's room, Gwen shut the door with a decisive click. "How in the hell did your sister get married to the most eligible bachelor in town?" Gwen's voice was filled with frustration and disbelief. "Mom, I'm as surprised as you are," Yvonne replied quickly, her tone tinged with frustration of her own. Gwen sank onto Yvonne's bed, her shoulders slumped. "Do you know who Gordon is? He's the heir to the Antonov Empire, a major conglomerate family," she exclaimed, her voice breaking with the weight of the revelation. Yvonne, initially sullen, suddenly brightened with a dawning realization. "But Mom, didn't Nara introduce that young man today as her fiancé?" Gwen's eyes widened in shock. "What the hell is actually going on? Mom, can you believe it? Dad didn't even get the chance to announce Briston and me." Yvonne sulked, the bitterness evident in her voice. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted when Selina knocked on the door. "Sir Edwin requests your presence downstairs. He said the guests are leaving and you should come to bid them farewell," she relayed before quickly leaving. Gwen sighed deeply, her frustration palpable. "Let's go," she said, following Selina with Yvonne trailing behind. Tilda. As they drove away from the mansion, Jeffrey, Gordon's PA, broke the silence. "What are you going to do now, sir? The girl seems like a tough nut to crack." Gordon sighed deeply, the weight of the evening pressing down on him. "She will come around sooner or later," he said, reclining into the car seat and closing his eyes. The events of the night swirled in his mind, a jumble of unresolved questions and frustrations. His thoughts drifted back to the genesis of the whole incident. A knock on his door had roused him from a deep sleep. "Come in," Gordon had answered groggily. Jeffrey had walked into the dimly lit room, the early morning light casting long shadows. Gordon, already seated on the edge of his bed, rubbed his eyes and tried to shake off the remnants of sleep. "What is it?" he asked, his voice thick with fatigue. "Your father requests your presence back home," Jeffrey said, his tone even but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. Gordon paused, a frown forming as he considered the request. "Did he say why?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. "No. He just made it clear that he wanted you back this weekend," Jeffrey replied. Gordon stood up from the bed and walked to the mirror, his reflection staring back at him as he pondered the significance of the request. It had been 5 years since he had last been home. The idea of returning stirred a mix of apprehension and anticipation within him. What could be so important that he couldn't tell me over the phone? Gordon wondered aloud. "Get my passport ready and book my flight. We're going back home." Jeffrey, who knew Gordon's aversion to returning home all too well, was taken aback. He had never expected this sudden change of heart. Why the sudden change of mind? He muttered to himself as he left the room to carry out the orders. Gordon stared at his reflection in the mirror, his mind a tempest of thoughts. "Finally," he breathed out, a sense of relief mingling with a surge of hope. He had longed to gain full control of the Antonov Company, and he was certain that this was the reason his father had summoned him. It felt like the opportunity he had been waiting for, a chance to secure his future and fulfill his long-held ambitions. Gordon was absorbed in a stack of files in his office when a knock on the door pulled him from his concentration. "Come in," he called out, his voice carrying a hint of irritation. Jeffrey entered, holding a file with an uneasy expression. "I've booked your flight back home, sir, but there's a problem," he said, his tone betraying concern. Gordon glanced up, irritation giving way to curiosity. "What problem?" he asked, setting aside the file he had been working on. Jeffrey handed over the file, his hands slightly trembling. "Your personal details indicate that you're married," he said, trying to remain composed. Gordon's eyes widened in disbelief as he took the file and scanned the information. "Married?" he repeated, his voice tinged with confusion and anger. "How did this happen?" "I don't know, sir. I should be asking you," Jeffrey replied, a hint of defensiveness in his voice. "This can't be right," Gordon said, his frustration rising. "How the hell did I get married without even knowing? This must be a joke." Jeffrey's face was serious. "They seem very serious about it," he said quietly. Gordon's heart raced as he continued to scrutinize the file. The name Nara Vespertine was printed boldly as his spouse. "Who the hell is this and how did we get married?" he exclaimed, his voice a mix of shock and anger. The revelation felt like a punch to the gut, leaving Gordon grappling with the reality that he was apparently married to someone he didn't even know. Tilda Gordon arrived at the Antonov mansion just past noon. As the car approached, a wave of nostalgia washed over him. The mansion, unchanged in 10 years, stood majestic and unyielding. "Sir, we have arrived," Jeffrey said, breaking the silence. Gordon stepped out of the car, his gaze sweeping over the servants lined up outside, heads bowed in respect. He walked past them with Jeffrey at his side, the whispers of recognition trailing behind them. "Who is that?" one servant asked, curiosity evident in their voice. "Shh, that's Master Gordon, the boss's first son," another responded, their tone laden with awe. "Huh?" The first servant's exclamation was one of shock and disbelief. Inside, the dining room was set and occupied by Jacob, his father, Penelope, his stepmother, and Briston, his younger brother. The sight of Penelope, seated across from his father, caused a flare of anger in Gordon. She was dressed in a lavish silk gown, looking every bit the matriarch. Briston sat beside her, a smirk on his face. "My son," Jacob exclaimed, rising with a smile. He walked over to Gordon and enveloped him in a warm hug. "How was your journey back home?" he asked, shaking Gordon's shoulders affectionately. Gordon nodded slightly, managing a faint smile. Words were never his strong suit. Come and sit. It's been 10 years and we have much to catch up on," Jacob urged, ushering Gordon to a seat. "Welcome home, Gordon," Penelope said, her voice smooth but cold. "Welcome, Gordon," Briston chimed in, though his tone was less enthusiastic. Gordon ignored them, focusing on his meal. Penelope rang a bell, signaling the cooks to bring in the food. "I'm so happy you're finally back home," Jacob said, helping himself to a bowl of salad. "Thanks, Dad. But I don't plan on staying for long," Gordon replied, fiddling with his napkin, his voice flat. Jacob's face was serious as he ignored the comment. "How is business over there?" Briston and Penelope remained silent, knowing better than to try to engage Gordon in conversation. His responses were always curt and distant. "Dad, business is fine," Gordon said. "Well, since you don't plan on staying long, that means we need to start finding you a wife as soon as possible," Jacob announced, his eyes twinkling with determination. Gordon nearly choked on his water. "A wife?" he exclaimed, his voice filled with disbelief. "Yes, a wife," Jacob confirmed. "Or do you think I would let you run the company without being married?" he added nonchalantly. Briston laughed softly, but Gordon shot him a hard stare, causing him to quickly look away. "Dad, what does running the company have to do with marriage?" Gordon asked, his frustration evident. "Well, my grandfather did it, my dad did it, and I did it. You must do it too, if you want the company," Jacob said, taking a bite of his turkey. Gordon's gaze turned to Penelope, who sat there silently, her presence fueling his anger. He could feel her calculating gaze, adding to his irritation. "Dad?" Gordon's voice was tinged with desperation. "My decision is final," Jacob said firmly. "Fine. If that's the case, I'm already married," Gordon said, leaning back in his chair with a mix of defiance and resignation. Penelope's head shot up, her demeanor shifting instantly. Jeffrey, standing at the end of the room, looked on in shock. "How the hell are you married?" Briston asked, his confusion palpable. "I hope this isn't a joke," Jacob said, his face growing serious. Gordon's expression remained steady, his brows furrowing in resolve. "Well then, bring her over," Jacob said. "Let's say in 2 weeks' time," he suggested. Gordon nodded, his palms sweaty despite his calm exterior. "Okay then," he said, trying to maintain composure. Jeffrey coughed softly from where he stood. He knew Gordon was many things, but a man of his word was among them. "Since it's settled, I'd like to take my leave," Gordon said, standing up. "Aren't you going to finish your meal?" Jacob asked, a hint of concern in his voice. "No, I'm not hungry," Gordon replied tersely, turning on his heel and heading for the door, with Jeffrey following closely behind. Once they were in the car, Gordon's voice was tight with urgency. "Get me every single detail you know about Nara Vespertine." "Sir?" Jeffrey asked, stunned by the abrupt request. Gordon's jaw was set, his determination clear. "Now, Jeffrey, I need to know everything." The taxicab pulled to a halt in front of Nara's house. Exhausted, she paid the driver and stumbled inside. It had been an incredibly long day, and as she collapsed onto her bed, she let out a deep sigh of relief. As she glanced out of the window, she realized it was already dark. The weight of her hectic day pressed down on her, making her feel even more drained. She collapsed back onto the bed, hugging her stomach as if to comfort herself. Her mind raced, replaying the events of the day over and over. Who was that man? And why had he called her his wife? She didn't even know him. How could she have possibly married someone she had never met? Suddenly, Nara noticed a flicker of light outside. She hurried to the window and gasped when she saw Andrew's car. Her heart sank as she realized she had left him alone at the party. As Andrew parked and hurried towards the front door, Nara rushed to open it, her hands trembling. The moment she saw his face, she knew he was furious. His expression was a storm of hurt and anger, and she felt a pang of guilt that she couldn't shake. Andrew brushed past her and stormed inside. "Nara, what the hell happened out there today?" he demanded, his voice sharp with frustration. Nara shut the door behind her, walking over to where he stood. "Don't tell me you believe what that man said," she said, her voice tight as she folded her arms. Andrew's eyes widened in shock. "How could you be so brazen to say that? How could a man walk into a party and make false claims like that?" "So you believe him?" Nara asked again, her voice growing more desperate as she moved closer to him. "Nara, the man took you outside with him and you followed him." Andrew's eyes were blazing now, his voice rising in anger. Nara stepped closer, grasping his hands in an attempt to calm him. "I don't even know him. I've never met him in my entire life," she pleaded, her voice trembling. Andrew looked at her, his face crumpling with pain. "I can't believe you would do something like this to me. Where did I go wrong, Nara?" His voice broke, tears welling up in his eyes. Nara hugged him tightly, her heart aching. "I would never do anything to hurt you. This is all a misunderstanding," she whispered, her own tears mingling with his. But Andrew gently pushed her away, his resolve hardening. "I think I need to leave. I need to clear my head," he said, heading towards the door. "Andrew, don't leave, please," she begged, her eyes brimming with tears. Andrew looked back at her with a heartbroken expression before shutting the door behind him. "Andrew!" Nara's voice broke as she chased after him, but he was already getting into his car. She pounded on the side of his window, calling his name, but he ignored her and drove away, leaving her standing in the cold. Nara tried to flag down a taxi, but she knew it was pointless. Whenever Andrew was angry, the best thing to do was give him space. She watched his car disappear into the night, her tears streaming uncontrollably. With a heavy heart, she dragged herself back inside. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she felt the weight of her emotions crash over her as her mind swirled with the turmoil of the evening. Exhaustion finally overtook her, and she fell into a deep, troubled sleep. Tilda Briston left the party in a haste to Gordon's villa, an imposing edifice set against the backdrop of the twilight sky. The villa, with its grand facade and expansive grounds. As Briston approached the ornate gates, they swung open with a smooth, practiced motion. Inside, the ambiance was serene but tense. The manicured gardens and the soothing sound of a distant fountain did little to mask the underlying tension in the air. The marble floors and rich wood paneling of the entryway contrasted sharply with the storm brewing in Briston's expression. Briston's voice cut through the calm. "Gordon!" he shouted, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. Jeffrey stepped forward with a polite but firm demeanor. "I think you need to watch your tone in Master Gordon's house," he said, his voice calm but firm. Briston, however, dismissed Jeffrey's tone with a smirk. "Get me Gordon," he demanded, his impatience palpable. Suddenly, Gordon appeared, his presence commanding immediate attention. His expression was one of controlled curiosity. "Oh, finally he is here," Briston remarked with a mix of irritation and relief, striding over to where Gordon stood. Gordon regarded Briston with a detached demeanor. "What was the meaning of the stunt you pulled this evening?" Briston asked, his voice carrying a sharp edge. "What stunt?" Gordon responded, his tone indifferent and detached, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of curiosity. "Don't play dumb. When did you get married to Nara?" Briston's voice was taut with frustration. "Nara?" Gordon's voice was laced with confusion, and he looked questioningly at Jeffrey, seeking some clarification. "Yes, Nara. My ex," Briston spat out, his voice dripping with resentment. Gordon's eyes widened in disbelief, his composure momentarily slipping as he processed the revelation. The realization that his supposed wife had a past with his younger brother was unsettling. "I don't owe you any explanations, Briston," Gordon replied, his tone cold and his hands firmly tucked into his pockets. "Oh yes, you do. You're doing this to spite me, aren't you?" Briston's accusation hung in the air. Gordon burst into a hearty laughter, a sharp contrast to the tension of the moment. "You are so shallow, you know that?" he managed between chuckles. "Need I remind you that you're already engaged? What I do with Nara is none of your concern." "Gordon," Briston began, but Gordon cut him off. "Get out," Gordon commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. He motioned to one of his guards, who stepped forward to escort Briston from the villa. "Huh?" Briston's surprise was evident as he stared at Gordon, disbelief etched across his face. "Get out," Gordon repeated, his tone now steely and final. Briston, his expression a mixture of anger and humiliation, turned and walked out, the garage trailing behind him. As the heavy oak doors closed behind them, Gordon turned to Jeffrey, his expression shifting to one of intrigue. "Why didn't you tell me Nara Vespertine dated my younger brother?" Jeffrey's face mirrored his confusion. "I'm as stunned as you are, sir. The information I gathered didn't indicate that." Gordon fell silent for a moment, the corners of his mouth curling into a contemplative smile. "This should be interesting," he mused, a glint of curiosity in his eyes as he made his way to the flight of stairs. Tilda. A loud knock on the door jolted Nara awake. Groggily, she rubbed her eyes and noticed the bright morning sun streaming through her window. She had slept through the entire night, her exhaustion evident in her disheveled state. Another knock, more insistent this time, snapped her into action. She rushed to the door, suddenly aware that she was still wearing yesterday's clothes. "Coming," she called out, her voice muffled by her tiredness. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise. "Elena?" Elena's face was etched with worry and confusion, her normally composed demeanor replaced by a look of serious concern. She barely greeted Nara before stepping inside and shutting the door behind her. "What's wrong?" Nara asked, her voice filled with apprehension as she followed Elena into the room. "Have you not seen the news this morning?" Elena asked, her voice tinged with urgency. "What news?" Nara's confusion deepened. "You can't be serious," Elena replied, frustration creeping into her tone. "I've been trying to reach you all night." Nara's heart sank as she remembered her phone still plugged in and charging. She had left it charging before she left for the party. Her pulse quickened as she rushed to retrieve it, her mind racing with worry. "Andrew must be so worried," she muttered, anxiously switching the phone on. Elena's eyes were serious as she folded her arms. "You didn't tell me you were married to Gordon Antonov." Nara looked up bewildered. "Who the hell is Gordon Antonov?" "Nara, you're making headlines this morning. Check the news," Elena urged, her voice laced with concern. As her phone powered up, Nara saw a slew of missed calls. Her eyes widened in shock when she read the headline that nearly made her drop the phone. "Uprising model Nara Vespertine secretly married to Gordon Antonov." Her mouth fell open in disbelief. "This is all a lie. How the hell did this spread so quickly?" she said, her fingers shaking as she scrolled through various articles and pictures of her supposed marriage. "Nara, how did this happen?" Elena asked, her confusion mirroring Nara's. I don't know. Some guy showed up at the birthday party yesterday and claimed I'm his wife," Nara said, her voice trembling. "Huh?" Elena's eyes widened in disbelief. "News is spreading like wildfire. I don't even know what Andrew must be thinking right now," Nara said, her anxiety rising. "Some guy, you say?" Elena asked, her tone sarcastic. "Yes," Nara affirmed, frustration evident in her voice. "Don't you know who Gordon Antonov is?" Elena asked her. "Wait, Antonov? Don't tell me he's— Oh my God!" Nara's realization dawned on her. "That's Briston's older brother and also the heir to the Antonov Empire, Nara," Elena said urgently. "Oh my God," Nara exclaimed, her shock palpable. She quickly dialed Andrew's number, her hands shaking. When the call didn't go through, she looked at Elena with a pained expression. "Elena, he's not picking up." Her voice was filled with apprehension as she clutched the phone, her mind spinning with worry about Andrew and the rapidly escalating situation. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. "Nara!" Andrew's voice called out, slurred and desperate. Nara's heart skipped a beat. She rushed to open the door, and there he was. Andrew, visibly intoxicated, leaning heavily against the frame. As he stumbled into her arms, he muttered her name before collapsing against her shoulders. Elena sprang into action, helping Nara guide him to the bed. "I've never seen him like this before," Nara said softly, her fingers gently combing through Andrew's disheveled hair. "He must have drunk himself into a stupor last night," Nara continued, her voice filled with sympathy. Nara sank onto the bed beside Andrew, her face etched with guilt. "This is all my fault. I don't even know why I left the party with Gordon." "Wait, you did what?" Elena's eyes widened in shock. "I'm sure he thinks everything is true, especially after I left with Gordon," Nara said, her voice trembling with regret. Just then, Nara's phone rang again. It was her father. She hesitated, the weight of her father's disapproval hanging heavy on her. Elena, sensing her hesitation, urged her on. "Pick up the call. At least try to clear the air," Elena said, her tone encouraging. Nara bit her lip, steeling herself before answering. "Good morning, Dad," she said slowly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Come to the mansion now." Edward's voice was commanding and abrupt, the call ending before she could respond. Nara's face fell, her heart pounding. The authority in her father's voice was unmistakable, but she had long since stopped caring about his harshness. "What did he say?" Elena asked, her concern evident. "He said to come to the mansion now," Nara replied quietly, her voice carrying a note of resignation. Huh? But I can't go now, Nara said, her voice breaking with the weight of her dilemma. Andrew needs me. I should be here when he wakes up, at least to clear the air. Nara, I'll stay and look after Andrew. You go, Elena offered, her voice firm but understanding. Didn't you say you were traveling back today? Nara asked, her confusion clear. Elena nodded, her resolve unwavering. I was, but this is more important. You need to take care of things with your father. I've got this. Nara looked at Elena, her gratitude mingling with worry. She knew she had to face her father, but leaving Andrew behind felt like a heavy sacrifice. Nara took a deep breath, trying to summon the courage she needed. Yeah, but my flight doesn't leave until noon. Besides, I've already packed my things and you'll be back before then. Are you sure you want to do this? Nara asked, her voice tinged with hesitation. Go upstairs and freshen up before I change my mind, Elena said, giving Nara a gentle push towards the stairs. Nara hugged her tightly before heading upstairs to get ready. Nara stood in front of the gate to her father's mansion, her heart pounded with anxiety. What would she say? How would she explain that she had never been married before? Her palms were clammy as she fidgeted with her clothes, biting her lip in nervousness. Summoning her remaining courage, she finally opened the door and stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet, and she felt a wave of relief when she didn't immediately spot Gwen and Yvonne. She wasn't ready to face their questions yet. As she climbed the stairs, her mind raced with potential explanations for her father. She envisioned his disapproving glare, one she was all too familiar with. Ever since her mother's death and being dropped at his doorstep, her father had rarely missed a chance to remind her of her illegitimacy. Lost in her troubled thoughts, she nearly missed Edward emerging from his study. His eyes were cold and unyielding, and when he coughed to get her attention, she looked up to find his piercing gaze fixed on her. Without a word, he turned and entered his study, the door closing with a final thud. Nara knew this was his way of saying, "Come to my study now." Steeling herself, she knocked softly before slowly opening the door. Edward sat behind his desk, engrossed in his iPad, his expression one of intense scrutiny. His demeanor was as formidable as ever, sharp, unforgiving, and every bit the commanding figure she remembered. "Good morning, Dad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her hands clasped nervously behind her. He raised his head slowly, his gaze cutting through her like a knife. "What is this whole thing about you being married to Gordon Antonoff?" he asked, his voice cold and authoritative. "Dad, it's all a misunderstanding. I don't even know Gordon. I've never met him in my life," she explained, her voice trembling with sincerity. "Well, he can't be lying, can he?" Edward's response was terse, his lack of faith in her words palpable. Nara's heart sank as she realized that her father's disbelief was as sharp as his demeanor. The very man who should have stood by her now seemed to doubt her completely, intensifying her feelings of isolation and frustration. Edward's eyes narrowed as he studied Nara with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. "How would a man like Gordon walk in here and address you as his wife?" "It's a misunderstanding," Nara interjected firmly, her frustration evident. Edward leaned back in his chair, his posture exuding an air of authority and disdain. "Gordon is not someone who would play around with something like this." "Dad, you don't have to worry. I'll handle the whole issue," Nara said, her voice tinged with a mix of determination and desperation. "And who is that young man you brought with you yesterday?" Edward's tone was curt, his curiosity edged with suspicion. "That's Andrew, my fiancé," Nara replied, surprised that her father seemed to have forgotten the introduction so quickly. "How can you be engaged and married to another at the same time?" Edward's voice was sharp, laced with disbelief. Nara fell silent, unable to offer a satisfactory explanation for the tangled mess. "Resolve whatever you have with Gordon," Edward said tersely, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I don't want you tarnishing the family's name." "Yes, Dad," Nara replied quietly, her shoulders slumping as she accepted the directive. "You can go now. Edward said, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. Happy birthday, Dad, she said, dropping the gift she bought earlier for him on the table. As Nara turned to leave, Edward's gaze followed her, a smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. Deep down, he harbored a secret hope that Nara's marriage to Gordon was real. In the midst of the chaos, it would at least provide him with a semblance of victory. He picked up the gift she brought from the table. Without even trying to know its content, he shoved it inside his drawer. As she stepped out of the mansion, her mind buzzed with unanswered questions. Why would Gordon Antonoff claim her as his own? She strained to remember if they had ever met, but her memory was a void. Was this some kind of cruel joke? Could Briston be behind this? Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted by the buzz of her phone. Fumbling in her bag, she pulled it out and stared at the text message that had just arrived. Call this number if you want to reach Gordon Antonoff. The number was glaringly bold beneath the message. She felt a mix of frustration and fear as she flagged a taxi, the weight of her problems pressing heavily on her as she headed home. Finally, you're back, Elena exclaimed, her relief palpable as she opened the front door for Nara. How is he? Nara asked, her face etched with worry, her voice trembling with concern. Well, he woke up a few minutes ago, Elena began, but Nara cut her off, her anxiety clear. Is he still upset? Nara pressed, her eyes searching Elena's face for answers. Elena studied her for a moment before whispering, I'll leave you two to sort things out. I have a flight to catch. Oh, I almost forgot about that, Nara said, her mind momentarily shifting. How did it go with your father? Elena inquired, picking up her bag. Nara's expression hardened instantly at the question. He said I should fix my mess. Geez, your father is really something, Elena remarked, shaking her head in disbelief. It's fine, I'll be all right, Nara reassured, though her voice held a hint of uncertainty. Elena stepped closer and enveloped Nara in a warm hug. Everything will be all right, Nara. I hope so, Nara whispered, her voice barely audible. They finally pulled apart and Elena said, I have to get going now. I'll call you once I arrive. Take care of yourself, Nara said, holding Elena's hands tightly. I will, Elena replied, finally letting go and heading out, leaving Nara to face the unfolding emotional storm. Nara walked into the living room and saw Andrew wide awake. How are you feeling now? She asked, sitting beside him on the bed. Andrew sat up and took her hands in his. I'm sorry for the way I behaved yesterday. You don't need to apologize. It's not your fault, Nara interrupted him. I don't want to lose you, Nara, he said, his voice filled with sadness. Nara turned to face him, cupping his face in her hands. You're not going to lose me, Andrew. This is just a misunderstanding, she said, hugging him tightly. So what are you going to do now? It seems the news is spreading like wildfire, Andrew asked as they broke the embrace. Nara sighed deeply. First, I need to meet Gordon Antonoff and clear up this misunderstanding, she said. Antonoff. That name sounds familiar, Andrew remarked. Yes, he's Briston's older brother. Huh? Andrew exclaimed. Nara held his hands tightly. We will fix this together, I promise, she assured him. What did he say when you followed him outside? Andrew asked calmly. Oh, he insisted I get into his car. I refused and left, Nara explained. Is that all? Andrew asked, unsure of her answer. Yes, of course. I don't even know the man, she said. Are you sure you don't know Gordon Antonoff? Andrew pressed. I have never met him before in my life, she confirmed. Andrew sighed. I love you, Nara, he said, tears in his eyes. Nara kissed his hands. I love you too, she whispered. As they were talking, a knock sounded at the door. Nara quickly got up to answer it. When she opened the door, she saw a man in a black suit. She would swear she had seen him before, but she couldn't quite place where. Suddenly, her eyes widened as a thought struck her. Was it at the party yesterday? She asked herself, but she wasn't sure. Have we met before? She asked, trying to place his face. Hi, I'm Jeffrey. Master Gordon sent me to take you to the villa, he said. Huh? Nara was confused. How did he know where she lived and why did he think she would go with him? But after a second thought, she realized she needed to go. It was the only way to clear up the misunderstanding. Andrew asked, "Who is there, Nara?" as he got up from the bed and headed towards the front door. Seeing Jeffrey standing there, he looked at him with confusion. "Nara, who is this?" he inquired. "Someone Gordon sent," she replied. Jeffrey assessed Andrew from head to toe before addressing Nara. "I'll be waiting in the car," he said curtly and left. Nara closed the door behind him. "What does he want?" Andrew asked, concern evident in his voice. "He was sent by Gordon to take me to his villa," Nara explained. Andrew's brows furrowed. "I hope you're not considering going," he said. "I have to go." "It's the only way I can speak with him and clear up this misunderstanding," Nara insisted. "Nara, you can't just follow a total stranger." "Andrew, I'll be fine," she interrupted. "Well, if you insist, then I must come with you," Andrew offered. Nara smiled, approaching him. "I'll be fine, and besides, you need to freshen up." Andrew looked at himself and realized he reeked of alcohol, with patches of it staining his shirt. He had drunk heavily the night before when he left Nara's house. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" he asked again. Nara smiled and pecked his cheek. "I will be fine," she assured him. "Okay, call me once you get there," he said. "I will," Nara promised, taking her handbag and heading towards the door. As she left, Jeffrey was still waiting outside by the car. Upon seeing her approach, he quickly opened the door for her. Nara, still a bit taken aback, gingerly entered the vehicle. The drive to Gordon's villa was eerily quiet. Nara's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She wondered what kind of person Gordon was and why he had made such troubling claims about her. She questioned his intentions and wondered how he would approach their meeting. The fact that she had never heard of him before, even when she was with Briston, puzzled her. She found it strange that he had remained so hidden from the public eye. Pushing these thoughts aside, Nara tried to focus on the matter ahead of her. Her eyes caught a glimpse of the villa. Grandeur of the villa ahead was hard to ignore. As the car stopped in front of a massive gate that opened automatically, Nara was awestruck. The lavish exterior of the villa was a testament to why Gordon Antonov was considered the most eligible bachelor in town. When she stepped out of the car, she was struck by the opulence around her. Statues stood majestically on the grounds, and a dozen bodyguards surrounded the estate. Nara wondered why someone would need such extensive security. As she turned around in awe and admiration of the sight before her, Gordon appeared. He walked toward her with an air of effortless grace, his every movement precise and deliberate. His looks were striking, handsome, with a commanding presence that was both alluring and intimidating. His eyes, fixed intently on her, conveyed a mix of curiosity and authority. As he walked closer to her, Nara could not ignore his chiseled jawline and piercing eyes that seemed to elicit a mix of emotions within her. There was an undeniable magnetism about him that was hard to ignore. He was undeniably handsome. His every step exuded a sense of effortless grace, his movements precise and deliberate. Nara found herself drawn to his commanding presence, which was both alluring and intimidating. The intensity of his gaze, fixed intently upon her, made her transfixed at a spot. "Miss Vespertine, you are here at last," he said, his voice smooth and confident as he extended a hand towards her. Nara looked at Gordon from head to toe, pointedly ignoring the hands he had extended towards her. He dropped his hands and tucked them into his pockets. "How was the ride here?" he asked, smiling. Nara, puzzled by his formal demeanor, chose to ignore his question. "Why have you brought me here?" she demanded, her brows raised in suspicion. Gordon sighed. "Let's go in and talk," he said, gesturing towards the front door. "I'm not going in there with you," Nara retorted, glancing at the direction of his hand. Gordon smiled. "I'll be inside waiting for you," he said before turning and heading inside, with Jeffrey following closely behind. Nara was taken aback by his audacity. The nerve of him to assume she would follow him inside infuriated her. However, she realized she needed to resolve the issue and that going inside might be the only way to do so. After a moment of hesitation, she mustered the courage to enter. Upon stepping inside, Nara's breath caught in her throat. The grandeur of the place was overwhelming. The interior was a stunning blend of sophistication and opulence, with high ceilings adorned with intricate moldings and crystal chandeliers casting a warm golden light. Plush velvet curtains framed tall windows, and the polished marble floors gleamed underfoot. Exquisite artworks and statues lined the walls, adding to the sense of luxury. As she took in her surroundings, a guard in a sleek black tuxedo approached her. "Ma'am, follow me," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Huh?" Nara responded, taken aback. Without waiting for a reply, the guard turned and began walking down a long, elegantly carpeted hallway. Nara, still in shock, followed him reluctantly, her curiosity piqued despite her irritation. The hallway was lined with dark wood paneling and subtle modern art pieces, adding a touch of understated elegance. They finally stopped at a door, which the guard opened with a practiced gesture. He indicated for Nara to enter, and she studied him for a moment before stepping inside. The sound of the door closing behind her was unnervingly final. She found herself in a lavish lounge. Rich, deep-colored furniture arranged around a central coffee table, and the walls were decorated with dark wood paneling and large, ornate mirrors. A subtle aroma of incense hung in the air, adding to the room's serene atmosphere. Gordon was seated comfortably on an overstuffed armchair, his posture relaxed and confident. Jeffrey stood beside him, his expression neutral and composed. "Have a seat," Gordon said, gesturing to a small, elegant cushion placed in front of him. Nara sat down, her expression guarded. "How did you know I was going to come inside?" Gordon smiled and crossed his legs. "You came all the way here?" "Of course I knew you would come inside," he said, his voice tinged with a hint of triumph. Nara felt a surge of irritation at his smugness. "And I know you have questions of which I'm the only one who has answers," he continued. Nara studied him carefully. His calm demeanor and composed posture contrasted sharply with her own agitation. Jeffrey, standing silently behind Gordon, maintained the same stoic presence. A woman in a sleek black suit knocked on the door before entering, carrying a tray adorned with fine ceramic cups. She set the tray down on the polished table in the center of the lounge, gave a slight bow, and exited the room with quiet grace. Gordon picked up a cup from the tray. "Coffee is served," he announced, taking a leisurely sip. Nara watched him intently, waiting until he had finished before picking up her own cup. With her cup placed back on the table, she turned to Gordon. "Why have you brought me here?" she inquired, her tone laced with curiosity. Gordon's response was a deliberate silence. Instead, he gestured toward a file resting on the table, indicating that she should examine it. Nara hesitated briefly before picking up the file. As she opened it, her eyes widened in disbelief. The document was a marriage certificate, and her name and signature were clearly visible. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion. "That there is our marriage certificate," Gordon replied calmly. Nara's face contorted in shock. "What kind of joke is this? When did I sign this?" Her disbelief was evident. Gordon shrugged, his expression unchanging. "That I do not know, but as it seems, we are both married." "This must be a joke," Nara said, laughing nervously. She glanced at Gordon, whose face remained stoic. The seriousness of the situation began to sink in. "Well, simple. Let's get divorced," she suggested, trying to keep her composure. Gordon reclined into his chair, a thoughtful look on his face. "What if I don't want to?" he responded. Nara was taken aback. "What do you mean? Why don't you want to divorce me?" "I need to remain married to you for at least a year," he stated matter-of-factly, ignoring her puzzled expression. Nara burst into laughter. "You must be insane. I'm engaged to be married, for crying out loud." She held up her hand to show him the engagement ring. "Oh well, that can wait," Gordon replied coolly. Nara was stunned. Gordon's reputation as a cold-hearted person was clearly accurate. But if you insist on a divorce, be prepared to pay an alimony of $100 million, he added. Nara's eyes widened in shock. This was far more serious than she had anticipated. What kind of insane demand is this? I mean, this certificate can be faked. Do I look like the kind of man who would fake a certificate? Gordon asked, taking a measured sip from his coffee cup. Nara struggled to find words. The gravity of the situation was overwhelming. Remain my wife for a year, then we can divorce quietly. You'll end up with $50 million, Gordon proposed. Nara clenched her bag in frustration. The man she had admired moments earlier was now someone she couldn't recognize. I'm sorry, I can't meet your demands, she said, rising from her seat. Are you sure about that? Gordon asked, his face as impassive as ever. Yes, Nara replied, meeting his gaze. Her heart pounded with a mix of anger and fear. Then be ready to hear from my lawyers, Gordon said with finality. Lawyers? Nara echoed, her confusion deepening. Gordon's expression remained unreadable as he set his coffee cup down and stood up. You have until the end of today to make up your mind, he said before walking away. Nara was left standing in shock, grappling with the realization of how coldly Gordon was handling the situation. She grabbed her bag and fled from the room, tears streaming down her face. She made her way to the open gates, gasping for breath. As she looked back, she saw Gordon watching her from an upstairs window. Disgust and frustration churned inside her. She turned away quickly and walked out, her mind racing with thoughts of how to explain this to Andrew. As she walked, she resolved to visit the registrar's office to verify the authenticity of the marriage certificate. Her phone rang with Andrew's name on the screen. In her panic, she turned it off, feeling a pang of guilt. Meanwhile, Andrew approached Gordon, who had been observing Nara's departure with an air of satisfaction. Do you think she will accept the deal? Andrew asked. Gordon turned to him, a smirk playing on his lips. She doesn't have a choice, he said, taking a sip from his glass of champagne. The registrar's office was quieter than Nara had anticipated, which was a relief. She was happy to see that her visit would likely be brief. She waited in line until it was finally her turn. Good day, ma'am. Please have a seat, the registrar greeted, gesturing to a chair in front of him. Nara glanced at him. He was an elderly man in his 60s, which contrasted sharply with her expectation of a younger registrar. Thank you, she replied, sitting down in the worn chair. Now, how can I assist you today? He asked, adjusting his glasses. I would like to verify a marriage certificate, Nara said. Why? He inquired, peering at her over his spectacles. Well, is it possible? She asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. The registrar scrutinized her for a moment as if assessing the validity of her request. What's the name? He finally asked. Nara hesitated briefly before responding. Nara Vespertine and Gordon Antonov. The registrar began typing on his aging laptop, the keys clicking rhythmically. After a few moments, he looked up. Ah, here it is, he said. Nara's heart skipped a beat. The marriage was indeed recorded. Can I see it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hold on a moment. Let me print a copy for you, he said, rising to operate the nearby printer. The hum of the printer filled the room as he waited for the document to emerge. He returned to his desk with a freshly printed sheet and handed it to her. Nara took the paper, her hands trembling slightly. The document was real. Her name was printed in bold letters, along with her signature and Gordon's. Is everything all right? The registrar asked, noticing her sullen expression. Ma'am, he repeated, seeing her lost in thought. Startled, Nara looked up at him. Can I take this with me? She asked, her eyes reflecting a mixture of anxiety. The registrar took in her apprehensive gaze and felt a pang of sympathy. Yes, you can, he said kindly. Thank you, Nara replied, carefully folding the paper and placing it in her bag. I'll be on my way now, she said quietly, before standing up and leaving the office. Nara sat at the bus stop, her thoughts consumed by the overwhelming reality of the $100 million in alimony demanded by Gordon Antonov. The weight of the sum felt insurmountable, and she knew Gordon was not someone to be trifled with. Despite her family's wealth, the Antonovs were a formidable conglomerate, and challenging them seemed like an impossible task. Tears streamed down her face as she contemplated the devastating news she had to break to Andrew. The prospect of staying married to a man she barely knew and did not love seemed unbearable. Her move from her father's mansion had not brought the relief she had hoped for. Instead, her situation seemed to worsen. She felt trapped, knowing that Andrew, who was not financially secure, was also unable to afford such a staggering alimony. With a deep breath, she wiped away her tears and decided to call Andrew. On the other end of the line, Andrew's voice was filled with concern. "I've been worried sick about you. Why was your phone off?" Nara's voice was soft and laden with sadness. "Meet me at Steve's restaurant. I'll be waiting for you." "Are you okay? How did it go?" Andrew asked urgently. "It went well. I'll explain when you get here," she said, her tone final before hanging up. The bus pulled up and Nara took a deep breath, bracing herself for the confrontation ahead. Steve's restaurant was a cozy, dimly lit establishment, known for its warm ambiance and elegant decor. The walls were adorned with tasteful artwork, and the soft murmur of conversations filled the air. The restaurant's polished wooden floors and crisp white tablecloths added to its refined atmosphere. Andrew was already waiting by a corner table, looking anxiously at the entrance. As Nara walked in, Andrew's eyes lit up with relief and he rushed over to embrace her. "I was worried sick about you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Nara clung to him, struggling to contain her tears. "Why do you look like this? Didn't it go well?" Andrew asked, his concern growing. Nara managed a faint smile and suggested, "Let's sit and talk," she said. He quietly led her to their table. Andrew's worry intensified as he noticed her pale face and teary eyes. "How did it go?" he asked again, his voice trembling. A waiter arrived, placing 2 glasses of Coke on the table with a soft clink. "Thank you," Nara murmured absently. "Is everything all right?" Andrew asked, searching her face for answers. Nara opened her bag and pulled out the document from the registrar's office, placing it in front of Andrew. As he picked up the paper, his expression turned to one of shock and confusion. "What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. Nara remained silent, her gaze fixed on the table. "This can't be true," Andrew exclaimed, his eyes widening in distress. "Nara, how did this happen? I don't even understand what's going on," he said, his voice filled with desperation. "I'm as stunned as you are." "I don't know how this happened," Nara replied, her voice breaking. "Are you sure this isn't fake?" Andrew asked, his frustration evident. Nara shook her head, her eyes glistening with tears. "I went to the registrar's office to confirm it. Oh my God." Andrew's eyes filled with tears. "Well, you can easily get a divorce, can't you?" "I can, but I have to pay an alimony of $100 million, Nara said, her voice breaking into sobs. "What?" Andrew exclaimed, his grip tightening on the paper. "I can't believe this is happening. Didn't you tell him you were engaged?" he asked, anger and sadness intertwining in his tone. "I did," Nara replied. "But he insisted I remain married for a year before he'll agree to a quiet divorce." "A year," Andrew echoed, his disbelief palpable. Nara, exhausted and defeated, slowly removed her engagement ring and placed it on the table. "Andrew, can you wait for me for a year?" she asked, her voice filled with desperation. Andrew was taken aback. "Don't tell me you're considering this." "Please," Nara pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Andrew looked at her with tearful eyes, overwhelmed by the situation. He stood up abruptly and left, unable to process the gravity of what he had just heard. Nara broke down, her sobs echoing in the quiet restaurant. She stared at the ring on the table, her emotions raw and unfiltered as she buried her face in her hands, ignoring the curious glances from other patrons. After regaining some composure, Nara picked up her phone and dialed a number on her phone. "I've accepted your deal," she said, her voice heavy with resignation. Gordon Antonov's voice on the other end was coldly satisfied, a smile evident in his tone. Dynasty was renowned as the most prestigious and influential modeling agency, the dream destination for any aspiring model. Known for propelling models into the limelight and securing them high-profile gigs with the country's top brands, it was a coveted platform. Nara had always envisioned herself as a top model, even from a young age, when she would pore over magazines featuring glamorous models. She embarked on her modeling career at 16 and was on the cusp of stardom when Yvonne entered the scene. Yvonne had always envied whatever Nara had, a jealousy fueled by her mother, Gwen. 5 years prior, when Nara was on the verge of a major breakthrough, Gwen used her influence to push Yvonne into the spotlight instead. Despite Nara's superior modeling skills and relentless effort, Gwen ensured Yvonne received the limelight and a coveted spot at Dynasty, establishing her as a top model in the industry while keeping Nara sidelined. In the bustling dressing room of Dynasty, the air was thick with anticipation and the scent of high-end cosmetics. The room was decorated in sleek modern tones, glossy white floors, mirrored walls, and contemporary furniture. Bright, flattering lights encircled large mirrors, casting a warm glow over the space. A chic array of designer dresses hung on racks, while elegant accessories were neatly arranged on polished counters. Yvonne sat at the center of the room, her demeanor the epitome of confidence. Her long, raven black hair cascaded in glossy waves over her shoulders, and her striking blue eyes were accentuated by meticulously applied makeup. She wore a luxurious satin robe, its deep maroon color highlighting her flawless skin and adding to her air of sophistication. Her makeup artist was in the process of perfecting her look, applying a bold red lipstick that complemented her high cheekbones and well-defined brows. 2 other models, also preparing for the runway, were in adjacent chairs. They wore similar robes, though less opulent, and their features were a mix of anticipation and eagerness. One had a sleek pixie-cut hairstyle and a fierce expression, while the other sported a tousled golden mane and a playful smile. Their interactions with Yvonne were marked by a mix of curiosity and subtle tension. As the makeup artist worked diligently, one of the girls broke the silence with a gossip-laden question. "Yvonne, have you heard the news that's circulating around town?" Her tone was laced with intrigue. Yvonne, feigning ignorance, stared intently at her reflection in the mirror, though the corners of her mouth twitched with irritation. The 2 girls exchanged amused glances before bursting into laughter. The atmosphere was charged with competitive energy. "I heard she's Yvonne's sister," the other girl chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. Yvonne's patience wore thin, her knuckles whitened as she gripped the arms of her makeup chair. "Why don't you girls ever mind your own business?" she snapped, her voice sharp and edged with frustration. The models looked at her in surprise, their amusement giving way to a more guarded curiosity. "You even heard us earlier and pretended like you didn't," one girl remarked, a hint of accusation in her tone. "And what if I did, huh?" "This is why you'll always remain a B-grade model," Yvonne retorted, her voice cold. "I can smell jealousy in the air," the girl shot back, her laughter a bit forced as she tried to diffuse the tension. Another girl interjected, "Do you think you're better than us? If it weren't for your mother, you'd be nothing, Yvonne." The comment sparked a burst of laughter from the group, their voices echoing off the walls of the dressing room. "Don't mind her," one girl added. "No wonder she ended up with that lunatic while her sister got the main prize." Yvonne's face flushed with anger, but she quickly composed herself. "Are you done?" she asked her makeup artist sharply, clearly eager to escape the room. "Yes, ma'am," the artist responded, her tone respectful yet tinged with a hint of discomfort. As Yvonne stood up, the tension in the room lingered, her frustration palpable as she prepared to leave. The room buzzed with a mix of anticipation and the lingering aftershocks of the heated exchange. Yvonne sprang from her chair, brushing off imaginary dust from her clothes as she muttered, "Fools," before striding out of the dressing room towards the runway. As Yvonne left, The director of the show, a tall, imposing figure with a commanding presence, addressed the remaining models. He wore a tailored black suit that exuded authority, with a silver watch peeking out from under his crisp shirt cuff. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his sharp eyes surveyed the room with practiced precision. Models, we're implementing a few changes. The designer has requested that we include models from Queen's modeling agency to walk the runway with us. They'll be arriving shortly, so please make them feel welcome. Remember, you are their seniors. The director announced, his voice carrying a tone of finality. As Yvonne was having her dress adjusted by a seamstress, she caught wind of the announcement and gestured for the director to approach. Her face was a mask of irritation and disbelief. "What's the meaning of this?" she demanded. "How do you mean?" the director asked, looking slightly perplexed. "Are you expecting me to share the runway with mediocre models?" Yvonne sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's all the designer's idea," the director replied, trying to remain calm. "What kind of stupid idea is that?" Yvonne's voice rose, drawing the attention of other models who were adjusting their outfits. The room's atmosphere grew tense as whispers spread. "Yvonne, calm down. We can discuss this later, after the show," the director urged, sensing the escalating situation. Yvonne scanned the room, noting the curious gazes fixed on her. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. "What's the name of the agency that's joining us?" she asked, her voice edged with tension. "Queen's Agency," the director answered. "Queen's? That's the least reputable modeling agency. Why would the designer—" Yvonne stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she realized something. "Isn't that the agency Nara is signed into?" she thought, her fingers fidgeting nervously. "Does that mean Nara will be walking the runway with me?" she asked herself. "Why must it be Queen's Agency?" Yvonne asked, her voice betraying her unease. "That's the designer's decision. If you wish, you can speak to him directly," the director said, nodding toward the exit, before turning back to manage the impending arrival of the Queen's Agency models. Yvonne felt her hands tremble uncontrollably as the reality of the situation sank in. The thought of sharing the runway with Nara, who had a knack for stealing the spotlight, made her anxiety spike. Nara's superior catwalk and overall modeling skills were top-notch, and she knew it. Yvonne felt a pang of insecurity. Anger and frustration boiled within her as she clenched her fists. In the dressing room, Yvonne was surrounded by a team of assistants and designers working meticulously to perfect her look. The room buzzed with activity, but Yvonne's focus was solely on her reflection in the large mirror. She wore a shimmering, deep emerald green gown that clung to her curves, emphasizing her figure. The gown featured intricate beadwork that sparkled under the lights, and its plunging neckline highlighted her toned shoulders. "Make sure this dress snatches my waist," Yvonne ordered, her voice sharp and demanding. The costumer, a slender woman with a calm demeanor and nimble fingers, nodded and began adjusting the dress. Yvonne's anxiety was palpable as she watched the costumer tighten the corset. The corset was a rich satin material, adorned with delicate lace trim and reinforced with steel stays that hugged Yvonne's torso. The laces, which had initially been loose, were now being pulled taut, and the pressure was becoming almost unbearable. As the costumer tightened the corset ropes, Yvonne's face contorted in discomfort. Her eyes, usually a striking blue, were now red and glassy with frustration. A strangled scream escaped her lips as the corset cinched tighter. "Tighter!" she cried out, her voice a mix of desperation and defiance. She struggled to catch her breath, her chest heaving as the garment compressed her waist. Yvonne's determination to outshine Nara was evident in every tense muscle and flushed cheek. She refused to let Nara outdo her or ridicule her in front of the audience. As the costumer continued to adjust the corset, Yvonne stared fiercely at her reflection, resolute in her quest to command the spotlight and ensure her presence was undeniable. Models from Queen's Agency began arriving by noon, set to walk the runway following Dynasty's models. Nara was bubbling with excitement, knowing that if she nailed her performance, she could be signed by Dynasty. She had practiced her catwalk extensively. Can I use the restroom? Nara asked the director as they entered the dressing room. Sure, make it quick. Your makeup artist will be here soon, he replied. Nara dashed into the bathroom and pulled out her phone. She had been trying to reach Andrew since their last meeting at the restaurant, but all her messages were read without any response. She stared at her phone with a heavy heart, knowing she had wronged him but feeling powerless. She splashed water on her face and took deep breaths. Nara, your makeup artist is here, one of her fellow models from Queen's agency announced as she entered the bathroom. Okay, I'll be out in a jiffy, Nara replied. She glanced at herself in the mirror, determined to push her personal issues aside until after the show. She needed to focus solely on the runway. The nervousness was palpable, amplified by the attention she was receiving due to the recent news about her marriage to Gordon. She had been avoiding conversations to steer clear of questions about him. The runway show commenced promptly at 1 p.m., with Dynasty models taking the stage first. Yvonne led the procession, dazzling in a silver dress adorned with black diamonds that sparkled under the lights. The dress shimmered with each step she took, its intricate design catching every eye in the room. Yvonne's posture was impeccable, her confidence radiating as she walked. The audience's eyes were fixated on her, and a wave of applause erupted as she made her way down the runway. She held her head high, savoring the cheers and admiration from the crowd, basking in the moment of triumph. All the Dynasty models had walked the runway. It was now the turn of Queen's model. The first model walked in courteously. She wore a gold-to-the-neck dress. She walked with grace and everyone was marveled. They all walked one by one till it got to Nara's turn. She was the last model to walk the runway. Immediate she stepped into the runway, Alicia Keys' Girl on Fire began to play. The light shone on her as she walked. She wore a black gown with silver stones which shimmered. Nara's walk was steady and composed, her eyes steady, her figure suited perfectly with the dress. Her hair swayed from left to right as she walked, her steps following the beat of the music. Her eyes were fierce and steady, her legs accentuated with her hips. She walked like a goddess. Everywhere was quiet as everyone stared at her, lost at the sight that beheld them. As she made her signature pose and walked back, the whole place was filled with a round of applause. Everyone got up on their feet, clapping their hands. Flickers of lights shone enveloped the whole place. Everyone was marveled. How is she not under the Dynasty agency? Someone in the Crow asked. As Nara stepped backstage, her fellow models greeted her with enthusiastic hugs. She quickly made her way to the bathroom, breathing heavily. Her hands trembled, unsure if it was excitement or anxiety. The applause from the runway still echoed in her ears, a reminder of her hard work and success. Taking a deep breath, she composed herself and left the bathroom. In the dressing room, the other models were stunned, having expected Nara to walk with more restraint rather than with the fierce energy she had displayed. Nara hurriedly changed clothes, eager to leave before encountering Yvonne. Just as she was about to exit, Yvonne's voice cut through the room. Nara. Nara turned to see Yvonne glaring at her, the disdain evident in her expression. Come with me outside, Yvonne commanded, striding towards the exit. Nara hesitated, her frustration boiling over at Yvonne's audacity. She didn't want to cause a scene, so she reluctantly followed Yvonne outside. The press, occupied with taking pictures at the entrance, failed to notice the two of them. What's this about? Nara asked once they were outside. Why do you always manage to steal the spotlight from me? Yvonne demanded, her voice tinged with anger. I don't understand, Nara stammered. You know exactly what I'm talking about, Yvonne said, grabbing Nara's arm roughly. Nara's eyes widened in shock at Yvonne's boldness. Yvonne only had power over her at the mansion, but here, Nara felt she could stand her ground. She slowly pulled her arm away, and with fiery resolve said, The next time your filthy hands touch me, you won't be able to use them anymore. Unbeknownst to them, the press had turned their cameras on the argument, snapping photos of the confrontation. Yvonne's eyes widened in fury. How dare you! She screamed, slapping Nara hard across the face, sending her crashing to the ground. At that moment, A convoy of luxury cars pulled up, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. The crowd buzzed with curiosity as a man in a black suit exited one of the cars and opened the door for a distinguished figure. As the man stepped out, gasps rippled through the crowd. "Isn't that Gordon Antonov?" someone in the crowd exclaimed. Nara gripped her cheek in pain as she lay sprawled on the floor. Slowly opening her eyes to acclimate herself, she saw the press snapping photos of her on the ground. She fidgeted, covering her face to shield herself from the relentless flashes. Suddenly, she felt a presence bending toward her. "Miss Vespertine," a voice she recognized, though she had hoped never to hear again, addressed her. She opened her eyes cautiously and found him. Gordon. His gaze was intense, almost unsettling. Gordon took out a handkerchief and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. Despite her deep-seated dislike for him, she couldn't deny his striking appearance. As his cold fingers brushed against her skin, she became aware of the sophisticated scent of his cologne. Without warning, he extended his hand and helped her to her feet. The press, eager for closer shots, tried to advance, but was held back by Gordon's bodyguards. Gordon guided Nara to his car and they left swiftly. From a distance, Yvonne watched in disbelief, unable to process the scene. Even as Gordon and Nara departed, she remained rooted in shock, unable to grasp the reality of the situation. So the marriage was true? Yvonne muttered to herself, her confusion deepening amid the flashing lights and background noise. Her manager rushed over and escorted her to the car he had arrived in. As Nara gazed out the window while they drove, she pondered how Gordon knew about her runway appearance and had witnessed her altercation with her sister. Feeling a wave of embarrassment, she glanced at Gordon, who was absorbed in his phone and seemingly indifferent to her presence. The car eventually stopped outside a grand restaurant. Nara read the name on the sign, Déjà Vu. She gasped in surprise. Déjà Vu was renowned as the most luxurious restaurant in town, a place few could afford. Nara hesitated, unsure if Gordon expected her to join him. As she pondered, Gordon's voice cut through her thoughts. "Aren't you coming?" "Huh?" Nara exclaimed, realizing she was indeed going to dine at Déjà Vu with him. The reality of the situation finally sank in. Gordon walked inside the restaurant, and she followed him timidly. Upon entering, Nara was struck by the restaurant's serene ambiance. The interior was elegantly designed with a minimalist touch. Soft lighting bathed the room in a warm glow, and the crisp white linens on the tables added to the sophisticated atmosphere. The sparse arrangement of tables created an intimate setting, allowing for discreet conversations and privacy. A man dressed in a steward's attire approached to greet them. "You are finally here, sir," he said, addressing Gordon with a respectful nod. Gordon nodded back and replied, "Come with me. I will show you to your table." The steward led them to a table at the center of the restaurant. Nara sat down, her curiosity piqued. "Is it usually this empty?" she asked Gordon, looking around. "I booked the whole place for today," he said. "Huh?" Nara exclaimed, her surprise evident. She quickly composed herself. "Sorry for what you witnessed out there," she said, apologizing for the altercation with her sister. Gordon remained silent, his calm demeanor unwavering as he fixed his gaze on her. "Let me ask you, Nara, do you know how we got married?" he inquired, ignoring her apology. Nara was taken aback. His inconsistency, being kind one moment and cold the next, was baffling. "I don't know. I can't even remember," she said quietly. Gordon shrugged casually, a subtle shift in his posture that suggested indifference. His demeanor was relaxed, with his eyes betraying a hint of amusement as he observed Nara. As he did, Nara noticed a distinct absence. Jeffrey, who was usually by Gordon's side, was not with him. "My family is throwing a dinner party tomorrow, and we are attending," Gordon announced. Nara's eyes widened. "Why do I need to come with you?" "You are my wife, are you not?" Gordon replied with a pompous air. Nara felt a surge of disdain. The only reason she tolerated his arrogance was because of the alimony. "Well, before that I sent you an email," It contains everything you need to know about me, Gordon said. Why do I need to know that? Nara queried. Gordon looked at her and replied, You don't have a choice here, do you? Nara was disheveled. Well, don't you think you need to know more about me too? She asked him. Why? Nara was incredulous. How could she tolerate this rude and arrogant man for an entire year? It seemed crucial for her to know him, but he didn't see the need to know her. Some husband you are, Nara muttered under her breath. I will pick you up at 7 tomorrow. Make sure you're ready by then, Gordon said firmly. Nara wondered about the kind of man he was. She marveled at how he issued orders as if she were his subordinate. A waiter arrived with a trolley carrying their meal. He placed the plates on the table and opened a bottle of Italian wine, pouring it into each glass. Bon appétit, he said with a smile before leaving. Let's eat, Gordon said, uncovering his plate to reveal Italian spaghetti, which he began eating with gusto. Nara's stomach churned with hunger. She'd nearly forgotten she hadn't eaten all day, a habit she'd adopted for runway preparation. Her stomach growled in protest as she uncovered her plate, surprised to find her favorite meal, ratatouille. How did he know? Ravenously, she dug into her food. Lest I forget, you'll be moving into my house next week, Gordon said, sipping his wine with an air of nonchalance. What? Nara exclaimed, nearly choking on her food. She hastily grabbed her wine glass and downed its contents. Gordon continued eating, his face a mask of indifference, as if her reaction was anticipated. What do you mean I have to move in with you? Don't married couples live together? Gordon replied casually. You can't be serious. How do you expect me to live with you? We barely even know each other. Well, that's why I sent you the email, Gordon said with a shrug. Get to know me through that. Nara's surprise turned to disdain. She looked at her food, now unappetizing. The idea of living with him, seeing his face every day, was something she could not tolerate. Married couples live together and we have to do the same, even if it's just for a year, he stated, his tone dismissive of her discontent. Well, I refuse, she retorted. Jeffrey will send you the contract for our marriage. Read through it and sign it, he instructed, ignoring her protest. Didn't you hear what I said? Nara's voice wavered with frustration. Gordon set down his cutlery, his expression cold. He picked up his napkin and dabbed his mouth with it, then rose from the table. Sign the contract when Jeffrey sends it, he said, turning away. Don't tell me you're leaving, Nara called after him. One of my bodyguards will send you home. I have a meeting now, he replied without looking back and walked out. Nara scoffed, feeling overwhelmed by a wave of nausea and anger. She gripped the tablecloth tightly, trying to steady herself. What had she gotten into? Ma'am, I'm here to take you home, the bodyguard announced, his voice firm yet respectful. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a stern expression that softened slightly as he approached her. Nara shot him an angry glare, sizing him up from head to toe. Her frustration was palpable as she pushed back her chair noisily and grabbed her bag. I can get myself home, she said, her voice edged with irritation, and headed toward the exit with determination. The bodyguard hurried after her, his steps quick and purposeful. He moved to block her path, his gaze earnest and filled with a hint of pity. Ma'am, please, I was asked to take you home safely, and that's what I must do. Nara was taken aback by his level of dedication. She wasn't surprised by the extent of his loyalty to Gordon. The way Gordon treated others often commanded a profound sense of duty and fear. You know what? Just tell your boss you took me home, she said, her voice softening slightly. I won't say a word about this. She turned on her heel and headed outside. The bodyguard followed her, his tone pleading. Ma'am, please. Nara sighed, finally relenting. She grudgingly entered the sleek black car that awaited her. The bodyguard climbed in after her, starting the engine with a smooth, practiced motion. The car sped off quickly. When they arrived at her house, the car came to a halt in front of her door. Nara opened the door and stepped out swiftly, barely waiting for the guard to come around and open it for her. She didn't look back as she walked up to her front door, her mind racing with the unsettling events of the evening. Nara murmured a quick thank you to the bodyguard before hastening inside her house. She collapsed onto her bed with a heavy thud, exhaustion overtaking her. The day's events, the intense meeting with Gordon and her contentious exchange with her sister, had overshadowed her recent achievements at the fashion show. Her phone buzzed inside her bag, jolting her from her thoughts. Pulling it out, she saw an email from Gordon. Her face tightened in frustration upon seeing his name. The commanding presence he exhibited at the restaurant had left her fuming, and she tossed her phone aside with a scoff. Was he really expecting me to read his useless email? She muttered to herself. Dragging herself to the kitchen, she reached for a bottle of water from the fridge. Just then, her phone rang. Her heart skipped when she saw Andrew's name on the screen. Desperate to hear from him, she answered immediately. How are you? Andrew's voice came through the receiver, soothing and familiar. Nara felt a wave of relief wash over her, the weight of the day lifting slightly. I'm fine, she responded calmly, not wanting to burden him further. Are you busy? Andrew asked. No, she replied. Okay, I'll be at the water fountain beside the park. I'll wait for you, he said before hanging up. Nara's face fell as she processed his words. She was responsible for their current situation, but her longing to see him was overwhelming. She missed him intensely. Without delay, she grabbed her bag and rushed out. The water fountain was only a few blocks away, but Nara opted for a taxi to avoid keeping Andrew waiting. The taxi came to a stop in front of the fountain, and she quickly emerged, scanning the area for Andrew. Her eyes brightened when she saw Andrew walking toward her, his figure standing out against the backdrop of the vibrant greenery. She dashed forward and embraced him in a tight, heartfelt hug, feeling a wave of relief and joy. I've missed you, she cried, holding him close. Andrew embraced her warmly. Me too, he whispered. When they finally parted, they walked together, hand in hand, and sat beside the fountain. Nara rested her head on Andrew's shoulder, feeling comforted by his presence. Nara, can you remember? This is where we had our first kiss, Andrew said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. Nara looked up, surprised. You still remember? She asked, her eyes widening. Of course, why wouldn't I? Andrew replied with a gentle smile. They shared a heartfelt laugh, but it soon faded into silence. I'm sorry for how everything is turning out right now, Nara said softly. Don't you want to figure out how you even got married to Gordon? Andrew asked. Nara sat up, meeting his gaze. I do, but I don't even know where to start. Gordon himself doesn't know how we got married, she explained. Wait, Gordon doesn't know? Then why is he insisting on staying married to you? Andrew asked, his confusion evident. Nara shrugged. I don't know, but I'm sure he has his reasons. Andrew sighed deeply. I'll wait for you, he said softly. Huh? Nara exclaimed in surprise. Andrew turned to her, holding her hands in his. I said I will wait for you, even if it takes eternity. Nara, I will wait for you, he said, tears welling up in his eyes. Nara, I love you so much and I'm not going to lose you. Even if it means waiting a whole year, I'll do it, he declared. Tears streamed down Nara's cheeks as she gazed at him, overwhelmed by his devotion. She couldn't believe he was willing to wait so long. Andrew gently wiped the tears from her face. I will propose to you again after a year. I'll wait, Nara, he promised, leaning in to plant a tender kiss on her lips. Mom! Yvonne screamed the moment she walked through the front door. Her voice echoed through the house, sending the maids fleeing in fear. Her rage was like a storm. When she was angry, it was as though the entire household was caught in its wake. She would hurl objects and bark orders, her fury palpable to everyone around her. Where is my mother? Yvonne demanded, her eyes flashing with anger as she spotted Selena, who had ventured out to investigate the commotion. She's upstairs, Selena replied, her voice trembling as she took a cautious step back. The fear she felt was evident. Despite having cared for Yvonne since she was a child, the girl's tempestuous nature made her a figure of dread. Yvonne stormed past Selena, shoving her aside without a second glance. She dashed up the stairs, her footsteps echoing like a countdown to impending chaos. Reaching her mother's room, she flung the door open with a forceful push. Gwen, Yvonne's mother, was seated in front of her vanity, dressed in a plush robe and meticulously applying lotion. The sudden intrusion startled her so much that she dropped the lotion bottle, its contents splattering on the floor. "Look what you've done." Gwen's voice was a harsh reprimand as Yvonne stormed into the room. Ignoring her mother's distress, Yvonne plopped onto the edge of the bed, her posture rigid with defiance. "Daddy will get you a new one," she said indifferently, her tone dismissive. Gwen, her face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief, snapped, "Do you have any idea how much that cost?" Yvonne, folding her arms and pouting, responded, "Mum, whatever you're feeling right now is nothing compared to what I'm going through." Gwen's gaze softened despite her frustration. She walked over to the door and closed it, ensuring their conversation remained private. Ever since Yvonne was a little girl, Gwen had treated her with a special affection, often overlooking her misdeeds. Yvonne was her precious one, the golden egg, Gwen affectionately called her, making her reluctant to scold her harshly. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, Gwen approached Yvonne and sat beside her. "What's the problem?" she asked, her voice now gentle. "You won't believe what happened today," Yvonne began, her distress evident. Gwen's curiosity piqued. She asked, "How was your runway show? Nara was there." Gwen's eyes widened in confusion and concern. "Nara? What is she doing at Dynasty?" "The designer wanted both Dynasty and Queen's agency to model his clothes," Yvonne explained, her voice trembling with emotion. "What?" Gwen exclaimed, taken aback. "Yes, Mom, and she did it again," Yvonne said, breaking down into tears, her face buried in her hands. Gwen's face tightened with frustration as she folded her arms. "Who is the designer?" she demanded. "Amare." Yvonne's voice wavered, her eyes still red from crying. Gwen's expression shifted from anger to alarm. Amar was a designer of unparalleled prestige and influence, someone Gwen's considerable wealth and social clout had failed to sway despite numerous attempts. "That's not all," Yvonne continued, her voice trembling with a mix of outrage and embarrassment. "Gordon Antonov came to the venue and took Nara away after we had a confrontation, and now it's all over the news." She thrust her phone towards Gwen, showing her the photos of Yvonne and Nara that were causing a stir online. Gwen snatched the phone, her surprise palpable as she scrolled through the images. "How could you let this happen? Why did you hit her in public?" she scolded. "She provoked me," Yvonne cried, her frustration evident as she stood up, her fists clenched. "I hate her." Gwen's eyes widened in realization. "Wait a minute. Gordon showed up there? Don't tell me the marriage was real," she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "I think it is, Mum," Yvonne replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Impossible," Gwen shouted, her frustration boiling over. "After everything I've done to ensure you marry into the Antonov family, how could Nara just come out of nowhere and ruin everything?" Yvonne slumped into a corner of the room, her shoulders hunched in defeat. "Mum, what are we going to do?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. Gwen's eyes narrowed, recalling the lengths she had gone to ensure her daughter's match with Briston Antonov. "Calm down. I will fix everything," she said, trying to comfort her daughter. "Mum, what do you have in mind?" Yvonne asked, noticing a calculating grin forming on Gwen's face. "The dinner at the Antonovs is tomorrow, right?" Gwen asked, her tone shifting to a strategic edge. "Yes, Mum. But what if Nara shows up?" "Stop fidgeting every time you see Nara," Gwen snapped. "I can't stand your indecisiveness." I can't stand her, Mom," Yvonne cried, her voice breaking. "Look," Gwen said, her tone softening. "Go get yourself ready for the dinner. Leave the rest to me." Yvonne's face brightened with hope. She rushed to her mother, throwing her arms around her in an enthusiastic hug. "That's why you're the best," she said, giggling as she planted a peck on Gwen's cheek. "Now will you let me get ready for bed? It's already late," Gwen said, her patience wearing thin. "Okay, fine," Yvonne replied, reluctantly stepping away. "Get one of the maids to clean this up," Gwen said, gesturing toward the spilled lotion on the floor. Okay, Mum, Yvonne said, and with one last smile, she exited the room. Gwen watched her daughter leave, then muttered to herself. Nara never ceases to amaze me, her voice dripping with disdain as she closed the door behind Yvonne. Gordon had just finished his bath, his skin still glistening from the steam when his phone rang sharply, cutting through the quiet of his bedroom. He quickly reached for it, his movements brisk and purposeful. Have you gotten the papers? Gordon asked, his voice laced with urgency. Yes, sir. Jeffrey's voice crackled through the line. Take them to her house and make sure she signs them, Gordon instructed, before abruptly hanging up. A small, satisfied smile spread across his face as he placed the phone on top of his sleek vanity table. The room was tastefully decorated, with a plush rug underfoot and a large mirror framed in dark wood. Gordon moved towards his walk-in wardrobe, his footsteps echoing softly on the polished wooden floor. He selected a vintage shirt with a subtle paisley pattern and a pair of well-tailored trousers. With deliberate care, he laid the clothes on his bed, its navy blue duvet neatly arranged. He swiftly changed into the outfit, then approached the mirror, adjusting his collar and smoothing out the fabric. As he checked his reflection, his initial smile of anticipation faltered momentarily. He pondered the possibility of trouble from Briston and his mother, a frown crossing his face. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called out. The door creaked open to reveal Stella, a woman in her late 50s dressed in a well-worn apron. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her face was marked by the lines of many years of dedicated service. Breakfast is ready, she announced, her voice warm and inviting. Gordon's mood lightened. Oh, okay. I'll be out in a minute, Stella, he replied, his tone appreciative. She nodded and closed the door behind her, leaving Gordon to finish dressing. He hurried downstairs, where the aroma of a freshly prepared breakfast wafted through the air, filling the spacious dining area with its inviting scent. The breakfast spread was meticulously arranged on the table. Crisp bacon, fluffy scrambled eggs, golden pancakes stacked high, and a steaming pot of coffee beckoned. Gordon's eyes lit up as he took his seat at the polished oak dining table. Are you that hungry? Stella's voice came from behind as she placed a jar of orange juice on the table. She took a seat across from him, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Gordon smiled, his appetite apparent. You know, I didn't have dinner last night, he explained, reaching for his cutlery with a sense of eager anticipation. Stella served him a generous portion of bacon, setting the plate down with a friendly flourish. Here, she said, her voice soft with familiarity. This smells amazing, Gordon remarked, his fork eagerly digging into the plate. He relished the rich flavors, savoring each bite. Stella pulled out another chair and took a seat, her gaze gentle. Take it easy, she advised as he quickly devoured the eggs and bacon. I will when you stop making such delicious food, Gordon said, taking a hearty gulp of juice. Stella laughed, the sound bright and cheerful. I'll think about it, she replied, still chuckling as she watched him enjoy his meal. That reminds me. Who was that young lady I saw running out from the house the other day? Stella asked, her curiosity evident. Gordon, who had just taken a sip of his orange juice, nearly spilled the glass. He set it down carefully and picked up his coffee cup. That's Nara Vespertine, he replied casually, his demeanor nonchalant. Stella, a woman with a wealth of experience and a keen eye, scrutinized Gordon. She had known him since he was a child and was accustomed to his reserved nature. It was unusual for him to have any visitors, especially not a young woman. The fact that he had been away for an extended period only heightened her curiosity. Who is she? She asked again, her tone probing. Gordon met her gaze, noting her insistence. Her fingers were clasped tightly and her knee bounced with unspoken questions. He knew Stella well enough to understand that she wouldn't let up until she had an answer. She's my wife, Gordon said, avoiding her eyes and focusing on his plate. Stella burst into a hearty laugh, her eyes crinkling with amusement. Oh my God. Gordon, you nearly made me break my backbone. You should be a comedian, she said, laughing heartily. Who in their right mind would actually want to marry Gordon Antonov? She joked, her laughter echoing through the room. Gordon continued eating, his face a mask of seriousness. Stella, seeing his lack of reaction, finally realized that he was indeed serious. "Wait, are you serious?" Stella asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Gordon set his fork down, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and leaned back in his chair. "I only realized a few days ago that I've been married for 5 years now," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of resignation. "Is this a joke?" Stella asked, her eyes widening in confusion. "Dad has been insisting that I get married before he'll hand over the company to me." "That's where Nara Vespertine comes in," Gordon explained. "Wait. How have you been married for 5 years without your knowing?" Stella queried, her eyebrows raised in incredulity. "That's what I plan to find out," Gordon replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "Did she know she was married to you?" Stella asked, her curiosity piqued. "No. When I met her, she seemed surprised," Gordon answered. "So you plan to present her to your father as your wife? Isn't that cheating?" Stella asked, her concern evident. "How is it cheating?" "Aren't we married?" Gordon replied, his tone defensive. Stella slumped back in her chair, her face a mixture of exasperation and disbelief. "We only need to be married for a year. By then, Dad should have transferred the company to me," Gordon added. "And I'm sure the news made her run out like that," Stella said, her voice sympathetic. "No, it wasn't the news. She wanted a divorce, and I told her she'd have to pay alimony of $100 million, Gordon said nonchalantly. "What? How can you be so casual about this? I mean, how do you expect her to agree to your demands?" "She barely knows you," Stella cried, her voice rising with frustration. "Dad is hosting a family dinner tonight. I'll be introducing her to him," Gordon said. Stella's eyes widened further. "I can only imagine how this will turn out." Gordon stood up, walking over to Stella. He bent down, hugging her affectionately and placing a kiss on her cheek. "Don't worry too much, Stella. I have everything planned out," he said reassuringly. Stella smiled, feeling comforted by his gesture. She had always been a source of support and stability for him. "I'll be on my way out now," Gordon said, heading for the door. "Oh, and don't forget to prepare the room opposite mine. She'll be moving in tonight," he added before leaving. Stella watched him go, her mouth slightly agape in surprise. She could only nod, knowing that when Gordon set his mind on something, he pursued it with determination. Having been Gordon's nanny since his mother fell ill, she had cared for him through thick and thin. Even after his mother's death, Stella had remained by his side, moving with him and managing his villa while he was abroad. Stella sighed and stood up, calling out, "Mel." A timid young girl emerged from the kitchen, her face reflecting her nervousness. "Clear the table and join me upstairs with new bedsheets. We're expecting a visitor tonight," Stella instructed, her tone brisk yet kind. Mel nodded quickly, hurrying to follow Stella's orders as she prepared for the unexpected arrival. The soft chirping of birds gradually roused Nara from her sleep. As she opened her eyes, still heavy with sleep, she allowed herself a moment to bask in the morning light filtering through her curtains. The warmth of the sun on her face contrasted with the coolness of the sheets tangled around her. Her thoughts meandered to her meeting with Andrew the day before. Her face beamed with an uncontainable smile that seemed to stretch from ear to ear. The sudden piercing shrill of her phone jolted her from her reverie. Her smile widened when she saw Elena's name flashing on the screen. With a burst of excitement, she quickly answered the call. "Hello, Elena," she greeted, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "Nara," Elena's voice came through with a mix of hurt and frustration. "You didn't even bother to call me." Nara's smile faltered, and she sat up abruptly, her tone filled with regret she had forgotten about Elena. Her mind had been consumed by the whirlwind of events from the past few days. "I'm so sorry. I've really been caught up with a lot since you left," she apologized earnestly. Elena fell silent, leaving a tense pause on the line. "Elena!" Nara's voice broke through the quiet, sharp with exasperation. "What?" Elena responded, her voice tinged with anger. "I'm genuinely sorry," Nara said quickly. I've been swamped with the whole marriage situation. I promise I'll make it up to you once everything settles down, she continued, her voice softening with sincerity. Are you sure? Elena's tone held a note of skepticism. Yes, I promise, Nara assured her, her smile returning. How's work? Elena sighed deeply, her weariness clear. It's fine. I'll be back in a few weeks. We're just wrapping things up here. I've missed our sleepover so much, Nara said with a nostalgic laugh. How have you been faring? Elena asked, concern edging her voice. You won't believe what happened, Nara said, her voice filled with disbelief. Tell me, Elena urged, her curiosity piqued. After I met up with Gordon, I discovered that the marriage was actually real, Nara said, her voice trembling slightly. Really? How? Elena's voice was filled with surprise. I don't even know, Nara confessed, her tone heavy with confusion and frustration. I'm still trying to understand how I ended up married to someone as awful as Gordon. Elena's reaction was immediate, a burst of laughter that seemed to shake the phone. Stop laughing, Nara pleaded, though a hint of a smile tugged at her lips. I'm sorry, Elena managed through her laughter. Is he really that bad? He's horrible, Nara exclaimed, her voice cracking with emotion. Condescending, rude, just unbearable. I hate him. Wow, Nara, you make him sound like a monster, Elena said, her laughter fading to concern. Well, I've asked for a divorce, but he's refusing, Nara continued, her frustration evident. He says I have to pay him $100 million in alimony. Elena's shock was palpable. $100 million? Are you serious? Yes, Nara said with a sigh, her shoulders slumping under the weight of the situation. Have you tried getting a lawyer for yourself? Nara's eyes snapped open, a realization dawning on her with surprising clarity. She had been so wrapped up in the chaos of her situation that she hadn't considered the most obvious solution: hiring a lawyer. You know, I hadn't really thought about that, Nara said, her voice tinged with newfound determination. But what can a lawyer do? The Antonovs are so powerful they could probably bribe any lawyer they want, she said almost immediately. Nara, get a lawyer to sort this whole mess out, Elena urged, her tone firm yet supportive. Nara couldn't help but smile. Elena always had a knack for cutting through a problem with practical advices. How is Andrew handling all this? Elena asked, concern evident in her voice. What's going to happen with your engagement? Gordon wants me to stay married to him for a whole year, so I've asked Andrew to wait for me, Nara explained, her voice carrying a mix of resignation and hope. We'll resume our wedding plans after that. Why a year? Does he think you're a joke? Elena's disbelief was palpable. He didn't give a reason, Nara said, shaking her head. But he did say that if I stay married for a year, he'll grant me a divorce quietly and I'll get to keep $50 million. My God, that's a huge sum, Elena exclaimed, her voice filled with astonishment. What did Andrew say? Elena's concern was evident. He was upset at first, but he eventually agreed to wait, Nara replied, her tone heavy with the weight of the situation. I feel so sorry for you, Elena said with a sigh. You get engaged today and discover you're married to a total stranger the next day. Does Andrew know about the money? Elena asked, a note of curiosity in her voice. No, I didn't mention it. It slipped my mind, Nara admitted, her face flushing slightly with guilt. I can't believe this is happening. It still feels like a movie to me, Nara said, a hint of worry lingering in her voice. Don't worry, everything will be all right, Elena comforted her, her voice soothing. You think so? Nara asked, a note of uncertainty lingering in her tone. I'm sure, Elena replied, her confidence unwavering. That reminds me, Elena said, her tone brightening. I watched you at the runway show. You were fantastic. Nara's face lit up with a genuine smile. Really? She asked as she turned over to her side. Yes, absolutely. I was mesmerized when I saw you walk, Elena said, her admiration clear. Nara turned in bed, her mood lifting with Elena's praise. Thanks, she said, her smile widening. I just wish I could get signed by Dynasty Agency, Nara said softly, her voice tinged with a hint of longing. With the way you walked, there's no doubt you'll get it, Elena said encouragingly, her confidence in her friend evident. Oh my God, Elena, you always know just what to say, Nara said, her smile broadening. Suddenly, a knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Who's knocking this early in the morning? Nara asked rhetorically, her brow furrowing in curiosity. Are you expecting anyone? Elena asked, her voice tinged with concern. No, not really, Nara replied, her voice tinged with confusion as she slid out of bed. She flipped on the bedroom light, the sudden brightness casting stark shadows on her face. Still in her pajamas and with her hair tousled, she made her way down the stairs to the front door. As she opened it, her eyes widened in shock. Jeffrey? She exclaimed, recognizing the imposing figure standing on her doorstep. He was clad in a sharply tailored suit, a briefcase in hand. Who's Jeffrey? Elena's voice crackled through the phone, curiosity evident in her tone. Gordon's bodyguard, Nara explained, her eyes scanning him up and down. Oh, what's he doing at your house this early? That's what I intend to find out. We'll talk later, Nara said, her frustration barely masked. Oh, okay. Take care of yourself, Elena said, concern lacing her words. Yeah, sure. And you too, Nara replied, her tone distracted as she ended the call. Nara turned back to Jeffrey, her irritation palpable. What is it this time? She demanded, her voice edged with frustration. Jeffrey, steadying his glasses on his nose, surveyed her disheveled appearance, her pajama-clad frame and unkempt hair. Can I come in? He asked gently, his tone a stark contrast to the situation. Nara, momentarily ignoring her own appearance, shifted aside to let him in. She didn't care about the mess she might look like. Jeffrey stepped inside, his gaze moving around her stylish and tidy living room. You've got a nice place, he remarked, still standing. Nara was taken aback. For once, someone associated with Gordon was speaking to her without an air of rudeness. Thanks, she mumbled. Have a seat, she gestured toward the sofa in the living room. Thank you, Jeffrey said, settling into the seat. Coffee? Nara offered, trying to mask her unease. Oh, no, I won't be staying long, Jeffrey said, placing the briefcase on his lap. Nara sat down across from him on the sofa, her anxiety apparent. Jeffrey opened the briefcase and extracted a single sheet of paper, handing it to her. Here, he said, his voice firm and unwavering. Nara took the document, her eyes scanning it with growing apprehension. Is this the contract Gordon said you were bringing over for me to sign? She asked, scrutinizing the contents. Yes, you need to sign it, Jeffrey confirmed, his demeanor unchanging. With a deep sigh, Nara resigned herself to the task. Do you have a pen? She asked, her energy sapped by the whole ordeal. Here, Jeffrey said, retrieving a pen from the breast pocket of his suit and handing it to her. Nara took the pen and signed the papers with a sense of finality, her movements hurried. Here, she said, passing the signed document back to him. Jeffrey neatly arranged the paper back into his briefcase and closed it with a decisive snap. Have you read the email that was sent to you? He inquired. Nara's face tightened into a frown. I won't bother myself with that, she replied reluctantly. Jeffrey studied her for a moment, a calm smile playing at the corners of his lips. The family dinner is today, right? You really need to read the email, he advised before standing up. I'll be on my way now, Jeffrey said, his voice leaving no room for argument. I'm Gordon's secretary, not his bodyguard. With that, he walked out of the house, leaving Nara standing there, stunned. She muttered to herself, What's the difference? She stood up lazily and went upstairs to her room to freshen up, determined to start her day with some semblance of normalcy. In her bathroom, she turned on the steamer to fill the room with soothing warmth, a habit she had developed to help her relax. She filled the bathtub with water, the gentle sound of splashing a calming counterpoint to her anxious thoughts. As she sank into the warm embrace of the bath, she placed her phone on the edge of the tub, letting the steam envelop her. The bath was Nara's sanctuary from stress. Whenever she felt overwhelmed, soaking in the tub was her escape, a place where she could remain for hours if needed. As she curled her legs to her chest and closed her eyes, the warmth of the water seemed to ease her tension, if only slightly. Her mind wandered back to Gordon and the contract she had just signed. The promise of $50 million after a year of marriage was boldly written in italics, a stark reminder of the financial relief it could provide. Was she being selfish for agreeing to the contract? She pressed her eyes tightly shut, wrestling with her conscience. The money was crucial. Her stepmother had ensured her father cut her off as soon as she left the house. The modeling gigs she managed to get didn't bring in enough to sustain her. The $50 million would be a lifeline, she thought. Nara picked up her phone and opened the email Gordon had sent her. As she read through it, she found herself stifling a laugh. The email was almost comical in its self-congratulatory tone, as if Gordon was penning an article about his own greatness. Suddenly her phone rang, jolting her out of her reverie. It was Gordon. "Hello," she answered, her voice muffled by the steam. "Do you have a dress for dinner tonight?" His deep, authoritative voice cut through the line. Nara froze, realizing with a pang that she had no dress suitable for the dinner. The realization dawned on her just how unprepared she was. "Miss Vespertine?" Gordon's voice came again, his tone now sharper. "Yes, I do," she replied reluctantly, trying to sound convincing. There was a brief silence before Gordon spoke again. "Get dressed. My driver will pick you up soon." Nara was taken aback. How did he know she was lying? Her mind raced as she tried to feign ignorance. "Why?" she asked, her voice tinged with pretense. "To get you a dinner dress, of course," Gordon replied, his voice dripping with a mix of amusement and authority before the call ended. Nara closed her eyes, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. The thought of being so caught off guard left her feeling humiliated,